Subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Was raised with its right hand. Several beams of light were launched and hit the concrete target. A small pit with its edges melted appeared on the reinforced concrete. The shape looked like a meteorite hitting the ground. There are traces of crystallization all around. Fox ran forward and carefully observed the marks on the target. I was amazed when I came back. It's incredible. Plasma can actually achieve effects similar to physical projectiles. How on earth is this done? Jason smiled when he heard Fox's question. The plasma emitted by ordinary plasma weapons is actually similar to an air cannon. Although it has impact and lethality, it cannot cause an explosion-like effect. Fox's question is really a normal question. The biggest problem with plasma beam pulse weapons is plasma confinement. High-temperature plasma will naturally escape in the air, but the plasma in weapons can be in the state of light pillars. This uses a 4-pole strong magnetic confinement device to produce a control effect and accelerating magnetic field, making the plasma maintain its state before emission under inertial conditions. Jason smiled and explained to Fox. Quadrupole magnetic confinement device. Is this the paper Tony Stark published in Science a year ago? Fox asked excitedly. As early as a year ago, Tony Stark published a paper in Science magazine. It is an article about the quadrupole magnetic Hall propulsion unit. However, no one took it seriously at the time, because there are few existing materials that can withstand the high temperatures of plasma. The highest temperature that humans can currently control is only a few thousand degrees Celsius. The temperature of the plasma must be at least tens of thousands of degrees, much higher than the surface temperature of the sun. How can ordinary people think that someone can really realize the practical application of plasma weapons? However, Jason was shocked when he heard Fox's words. This guy Tony Stark can do it. He has already studied the theoretical basis. No wonder they can create steel armor. That's true, but this thing is actually derived from the Hall thruster. It was originally a propulsion device. The ionized working medium is ejected through the nozzle, providing a sufficiently powerful thrust. Even now that it's weaponized, it still has the function of a thruster. Jason explained with a smile. Tony Stark actually created this weapon by accident. He originally wanted to use this thing as a simple propulsion device. This kind of thing is generally used on rockets. The initial version of the iron armor studied by Tony Stark was a simple propulsion unit. There are no other functions. The firepower can only be applied to the flame burner strapped to the armor. It was still when I was upgrading the second-generation armor. He discovered the thruster's weapon function accidentally. Later, after constant strengthening, only then did the now mature plasma beam pulse weapons form. It can be said that this weapon is essentially a small Hall propulsion unit. Fox's eyes lit up when he heard Jason's explanation. What an exquisite design. The plasma generated by the Hall thruster is ejected as a weapon. The weapon has multiple functions. It's a genius design. Haha, it's just an idea. The key is that the working medium consumption is very small, and it can fully support long-term operations. Jason explained with a smile. Plasma weapons actually also require a working medium. Matter in the world is conserved, and matter is never created out of thin air. In order to generate reaction force, there must be sufficient propulsion medium. So the fire that appears to be ejected from a steel armor is actually some kind of special particle medium. It is no different from the tail flame of a chemical rocket. It is actually very difficult to convert this part of the working medium into weapons. What a genius! He can launch such a powerful attack and only consume so much medium. Are plasma weapons really that powerful? Fox said with a sigh. Actually, it's not that exaggerated. Plasma weapons also have their own shortcomings. For example, the accuracy is relatively low, the penetration is relatively weak, etc. Jason smiled and explained. In fact, the shortcomings of plasma weapons can also be seen in the original movie, when Tony was dealing with highly armored things like tanks. It uses armor-piercing projectiles in its arms instead of plasma weapons, because unless this weapon is charged for a long time, it will be difficult to penetrate armor as thick as a tank. The rifle was also used when rescuing hostages. If plasma weapons are used, I'm afraid even the hostage original can be killed. There is no perfect weapon in the world. However, this kind of weapon is not suitable for steel armor. It has many additional functions and can also be used as a powerful weapon. It can fully meet the requirements for the use of steel armor, so he has no need to change it all. Chapter 27. Bargaining. The technology used in the steel armor is very advanced. I have told Fox about it, and the old man seems to be addicted. Jason wasted a long time before sending the old man away. It also provides a lot of technical information. Jason looked at Fox leaving and sighed. Never mind. Just think of cultivating talents for Wayne Group. Sooner or later, Wayne Group will be his. Round it all off, he is just training people. After thinking about all this, Jason felt much better. After feeling better, Jason once again turned his attention to the steel armor assembly factory in front of him. A new steel armor is being assembled here. The first steel armor was just a test product and did not fit his figure at all. The one developed now is the complete version. And compared to Tony Stark, he is much richer. Although Wayne Group may be worth about the same as Stark Industries. But the Wayne family is very rich. It's not just cross-holdings of many companies. And it has a lot of private mines. It's not like Tony Stark, who has to order everything he needs from other companies. If he wants to buy something, he only needs his own company. The cost of a steel battle suit naturally saves a lot. So he just produced a lot of sets. A few sets for himself, a few sets for his cheap old man, and a few sets for Alfred. It can be said that the production capacity of his laboratory has been completely slowed down recently. However, when he was about to put on the steel armor and test it out, Alfred came to the door. "Master, Tony Stark has been missing for 4 days. Should we help them search?" Alfred reminded Jason as he looked at him. When Jason gave Tony Stark body armor, a positioning device was implanted in the body armor. The purpose is that if something goes wrong, he will find someone to come out personally. Otherwise, the desert in the oil country is so big. Who knows where Tony Stark was kidnapped by the World Gang? 4 days. Jason asked in surprise. The military and Stark Industries haven't found Tony Stark yet? Yes, Master. Stark Industries' stock has plummeted in the past few days. People in the military are going crazy too. Alfred shook his head and said. Jason was a little dumbfounded when he heard this. Tony Stark was really popular before he decided to shut down the weapons division of Stark Industries. As the most popular arms dealer in the Bald Eagle Empire, Stark Industries does have deep connections in the military. If it weren't for Tony Stark's naive attempt to die, the Congress of the Bald Eagle Empire simply didn't dare question Tony Stark. However, Tony Stark is too naive. I really feel that if he closes the weapons department, the Bald Eagle Empire will stop causing trouble in the world. This also offended a group of senior military officials. But this is also very admirable. After all, not everyone has the courage to give up tens of billions of profits every year. In this regard, Tony Stark does live up to the name Iron Man. After thinking for a while, Jason frowned. He really didn't know how long Tony Stark had been held captive by the terrorists. It's just that if this guy really doesn't build the thing in time, this group of inhumane terrorists may not leave Tony Stark alive at all. Jason felt that he should really prepare for a rainy day. So he looked up and said, Grandpa Alfred, go to Stark Industries to buy at the bottom and acquire the shares of several small shareholders. As for Tony Stark, let's wait 2 days. Master, even so, the stock price of Stark Industries is at its lowest point right now. Do we really want to buy it? Alfred spoke. Don't worry. Tony Stark will definitely come back. The stock price of Stark Industries will definitely rise by then, and we will not lose money. It's the young master. Alfred said something and left the laboratory directly. Jason shook his head and continued experimenting. At the moment, Tony Stark, who was worried about Jason, was in a very bad situation. Although his condition is much better because of the body armor Jason gave him, but he still didn't avoid a big hole in his chest. After all, Jason didn't think about things that comprehensively. The body armor provided cannot protect the limbs. Tony Stark was shot twice in the upper thigh. Fortunately, the shrapnel was very small and the wound was not serious. But I still put an electromagnet on my chest. Mr. Stark, how are you feeling? Jason asked, looking at Tony Stark with concern. Oh, Ethan, it would be better if you didn't tell me. I feel more pain in my body now. Tony Stark held the pliers in front of him tightly. Keep the pouring mold in front of you from shaking. Then hold on, I'll start. Ethan reminded him. Be careful. Ethan, we only have one chance. Tony Stark reminded. The palladium metal they used was not easy for him to remove from the missile. If the casting fails, they have no chance. Don't worry, Mr. Stark. I have a steady hand. Ethan was joking as he poured the silver liquid into the mold. Soon, a blue reactor was installed on Tony Stark's chest. Okay, Ethan, this is just the beginning. If we want to escape, we have to do something else. Tony Stark glanced at the mirror and said, It seems you have a plan, Mr. Stark. Ethan smiled and said, That's definitely it. Okay, let's get to work. Tony Stark smiled and said, In the next few days, the two worked hard. The first generation iron armor was produced based on Tony Stark's technology. However, the leader of Ten Rings is not a fool. On the day his steel armor was finished, the leader immediately realized something was wrong. Countless terrorists poured in from outside. After looking at the scene outside, Tony Stark said hurriedly, Ethan, open the program, upload the control package, and let me know when the progress bar is full. Because Mia had the help of JRVS, he could only use that old computer to compile the program. It's easy to control this behemoth weighing several hundred kilograms. However, this outdated computer has long been out of date. Loading speed is very slow. Mr. Stark, I'm going out to buy you some time. Ethan said a few words, picked up the gun, and rushed outside. Hey, Ethan, follow the plan. Tony Stark shouted loudly. It's a pity that Ethan has already run away. Chapter 28, A hero descends from heaven inside the dark cave. Gunshots constantly came from outside. Tony Stark was in the cave, but he was worried. Originally, according to his plan, he was in the front and killed the terrorists. Then let Ethan leave after him. Just didn't expect it. The cultural level of terrorists is too low. The computer I found was last century. Its computing capabilities simply cannot meet his requirements. The program loads much slower and takes a lot of time. Ethan could only go out and buy him time. However, Tony was very anxious. Although Ethan was born in a chaotic place like an oil country, he originally had a certain fighting ability. But there are so many terrorists out there. It was impossible for Ethan to buy much time. After a long wait, the armor program was finally loaded. Tony Stark is finally ready for action. At this time, terrorists finally came outside the cave. Soon they entered the cave to search. Tony Stark has been preparing for a long time in the dark. Seeing the terrorist in front of him, Tony Stark directly used huge amounts of mechanical arms to capture the non-terrorist. With the huge roar of the electric engine inside the body, the mechanical arm emits huge power. The terrorist's neck was broken directly. The remaining terrorists also began to fire wildly. It's just that the bullets of the AK-47 pose no threat at all in the face of special steel that is nearly 2 centimeters thick. The bullet bounced off the metal when it hit the metal, posing no threat to Tony Stark at all. Tony Stark directly used the suit to punch the terrorists against the wall one by one. Driven by a powerful electric motor, Tony Stark's punches are powerful enough to punch through concrete walls. If it hits someone, at least the ribs will be broken. Several terrorists leaned into the corner as if they had been hit by a car, seeing it is already impossible to survive. Tony Stark didn't have any intention of lingering and walked out without a fight. Dozens of terrorists along the way. Even the huge iron door built in the cave was directly demolished by Tony Stark. When the terrorists saw this terrifying metal monster, they had no courage to fight. Just turn around and run away. Only the terrorist boss, who was very courageous, faced Tony Stark directly with a grenade launcher. Tony Stark, after shouting a few words, the terrorist leader directly pulled the trigger. However, it seems that he was used to being pampered and the grenades he fired were very inaccurate. Didn't meet Tony Stark at all. Instead, it brushed against his shoulder and flew over his head. Behind Tony, Ethan was running out of the cave with the rifle. The broken stone hit Ethan directly. Ethan, with a loud shout, Tony opened fire. Blast the terrorists to the ground. Ethan, how are you? I'll take you out. Don't you want to see your family? Tony Stark said anxiously. No need, Mr. Stark. I'm going to see my family soon. They're long dead. When it comes to you, you must live well. A genius like you should not die here. After saying that, Ethan lost his voice, but there was still a smile on his face. Tony Stark gave Ethan a deep look and walked directly outside. Along the way, killing several terrorists, Tony Stark walked directly to the door. Dozens of terrorists were already surrounding outside, and they opened fire directly around Tony Stark. Countless bullets hit Tony Stark's body. It makes a crackling sound. Tony Stark directly opened the flamethrowers on both arms. Dozens of meters of flames shot out directly from the mecha's arms, and dozens of terrorists were burned until they cried for their fathers. Tony Stark looked around at the weapons. He took a deep breath and began to burn the weapons around him. However, there was no time for him to do more. A heavy machine gun halfway up the mountain pointed directly at him. Under the blows of the 12mm heavy machine gun, Tony Stark was also beaten back one after another. Even worse, this steel armor is just the elementary level version, and the transmission structure is still outside the armor. These were interrupted directly by heavy machine guns. Suddenly lost the ability to move. At this time, the surrounding terrorists became even more crazy, shooting at Tony Stark crazily. This makes Tony Stark's situation even worse. Chet, are these people crazy? I'm afraid the weapons depot will be destroyed directly. Tony Stark's expression changed. He has no interest in dying with these brainwashed terrorists. So he touched his back directly, preparing to activate the escape button and leave directly. He had considered this situation from the beginning. 2 missile jets were installed on his back. As long as he presses the button, he can go to heaven and escape from here. His expression changed, and Tony Stark pressed the button directly. But to his expectation, the imaginary pushing sensation on his back did not come. The thruster for which he had high hopes did not start. In an instant, Tony Stark's expression changed drastically. Chemical thrusters have their own unique advantages. That is, the thrust is large and stable, and it is difficult to cause danger. But there is also a disadvantage. That is, it must be stable when burning. Tony Stark's heart sank. The worst he imagined happened. The combustion chamber is damaged, and the chemical fuel cannot be ignited to provide sufficient thrust. Look at the terrorists around and the burning bombs. The expression on Tony Stark's face was very sad. Could it be that the bald eagle empire is the #1 genius? Are you going to die here today? Thinking of this, even Tony Stark's face flashed with a hint of despair. Just when he was desperate, Tony Stark heard a cry of surprise. Then I saw a dark shadow flash in front of me. There was a black and white figure in front of him. The figure was half kneeling on the ground, with traces of impact beneath his feet. Chet, what is this? Tony Stark was stunned. Looks like I'm not too late, Mr. Stark. As the white figure turned around, a voice also sounded from Tony Stark's ears. Jason Wayne, I'm glad you can still hear my voice. Okay, let's deal with these guys first. We'll talk about old times later. With that said, Jason controlled the mecha and started attacking directly. The hand cannon in his hand kept firing, wiping out all the surrounding terrorists. Tony Stark looked at the performance of the white armor in front of him. His face was full of shock and disbelief. Chapter 29 Tony is rescued in the endless desert. The two figures are particularly conspicuous. These two people are naturally Jason and Tony Stark, who escaped from the Ten Rings base. After dealing with the Ten Rings people, Jason doesn't want to die with these terrorists. Tony Stark was pulled directly and flew into a large desert next to him. Give Tony Stark water for a lifetime. Jason smiled and said, Tony, you didn't expect me to save you. You guys, Stark Industries, are not good at it. You were so ineffective in searching for you when you disappeared. Jason said a few words secretly. The world of Stark Industries is not as bad as he said. But with that old guy Obadiah who wants Tony Stark's life around, how can Stark Industries really look for Tony Stark? Tony Stark didn't even care about the words in Jason's tone. After taking a sip of water, he looked repeatedly at Jason, who was wearing the armor in front of him. Those fiery eyes made Jason feel uncomfortable. if it weren't for Tony Stark being a famous playboy in the circle. He even thought Tony Stark had some special quirks. What does your look mean? Jason couldn't help but speak. Nothing, what is this on you? Tony Stark looked at it for a long time and couldn't help but ask, although he also developed steel armor. But the difference between the Taihanhin he made and the steel armor Jason is wearing now is huge. That is simply the difference between a phoenix and a sparrow. Naturally, he would not associate the two things together. However, Jason looked a little embarrassed. Show off the steel armor in front of the developer of this armor. Even with his thick skin, he still felt a little embarrassed. Steel armor. Jason coughed slightly and said. Tony Stark took another look at Jason's close-fitting black and white armor. He spoke slowly. It's really impressive. This should be due to the use of the Mills reaction force buffer system. The lifting system should use a new type of Hall thruster. It's just that the reactor on your chest looks a bit familiar. Tony Stark looked at the five-pointed star on Jason's chest. Looking at the glowing reactor on his chest, I always feel that this thing looks very familiar. Ahem. This is the small-scale cold fusion technology one developed. How is it? Isn't it great? Jason directly interrupted Tony Stark's reverie and spoke first. It's really amazing. I've just reached the threshold of cold nuclear fusion. I didn't expect that you actually figured out this technique. It's pretty good. Tony Stark nodded reluctantly. It's a good comment to be able to say it in his mouth. It's actually pretty good. Even Dr. Bruce Banner did not receive this kind of evaluation in Tony Stark's mouth. Bruce Banner is as powerful as Einstein, with 8 doctorates. Tony Stark himself only has 2 PhDs. This is enough to show that Tony Stark recognizes Jason. Jason smiled awkwardly when he heard this. Ahem, you're not bad. You're not bad either. After all, Jason is still a person with a sense of shame, and he cannot yet feel comfortable taking the fruits of other people's work as his own. But before he could be humble, Tony Stark spoke first. It's just that your ideas are more advanced than mine. It can be seen that the output power of the cold fusion reactor on your chest should be higher than ours. In terms of the design of the steel armor, your ideas are more mature than ours. I originally designed the armor, but you just saw it. It doesn't seem that useful. Tony Stark laughed at himself and said. Hearing this, Jason could only laugh. Can something made in a prison be the same as something made in a top laboratory? The gap between the two is huge. Don't worry, Tony. You can definitely make a more powerful armor than the one I have on me. I believe this day will not be too far away. Seeing Tony Stark's face looking slightly sad, Jason comforted him. Tony Stark also nodded. Yes, I will surpass you soon. I feel like this armor I'm wearing will soon become obsolete. Tony Stark said very confidently. Jason sighed inwardly when he heard this. Tony, you're simply too young. It's not easy to surpass my skills. However, he won't remind Tony Stark of this iron-headed boy. He spoke directly. Okay, it's time for me to leave. The people who came to pick you up are already nearby. I'll leave first. By the way, don't tell others that I rescued you. After saying that, without waiting for Tony Stark to refute, he flew into the sky. He's not as swagger as Tony Stark. This thing is very eye-catching. Although the Wayne family is not afraid of trouble. But I don't want to cause trouble myself. He couldn't do something as stupid as Tony Stark. The remaining aircraft of the Bald Eagle Army were nearby. He would be discovered if he didn't leave. Fortunately, his armor is very advanced. It is equipped with the most advanced radar stealth coating, and the military radar cannot detect him at all. Otherwise, he would not come to the desert to save Tony Stark himself. It would be bad if it was hit by 2 Tomahawk missiles. Jason drove the suit away directly, but Tony Stark had no way to leave. Looking at the white figure going away, he shouted, "Thank you," loudly. He sat directly on the ground. There is no image at all. Moreover, the expression on Tony's face was unusually solemn, without his usual cynical expression at all, until the sound of a helicopter came from nearby. Tony Stark stood up directly as if he had just woken up from a dream. Colonel Roddy on the helicopter was extremely surprised to see Tony. Hey Tony, are you okay? Do you think I'm fine? I need a cheeseburger right now, and you better give me a glass of chilled wine. Otherwise, I will go crazy soon. Tony Stark shouted loudly. Roddy said with a smile when he saw that Tony Stark didn't look affected. Haha, Let yourself leave with the convoy. Next time, just follow me and leave." After speaking, Roddy patted Tony Stark on the shoulder and helped him get on the plane. They didn't see it. On a helicopter near them, a soldier was watching them. He was talking about something while pressing the headset. Chapter 30, The Inexplicable Enemy, New York City. In an extraordinary laboratory, a middle-aged white man with blonde hair and a good-looking appearance was on the phone. "What?" Tony Stark escaped. "You bunch of losers." The blonde man shouted loudly. "Killian, our relationship is just a cooperative relationship. Don't push yourself too far." When Killian heard this, he was furious and hung up the phone. A red light flashed in his hand. The phone turned into a pool of black liquid, flowing on the ground and solidifying quickly. Killian was very angry at the moment. He regards Tony Stark as his lifelong enemy, always looking for an opportunity to kill Tony Stark directly. This time he finally found a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Tony Stark's uncle, Obadiah Stane, had a falling out with Stark for some unknown reason. 10 Rings of Petroleum was contacted directly. For some reason, he was connected to the 10 Rings people. How could Killian let go of such a good opportunity? Contact the people at 10 Rings directly and ask them to kill Tony Stark. A sum of money was also specially provided for them to purchase new weapons and equipment. But he didn't expect it. The 10 Rings bunch of losers actually captured Tony Stark and let him run away. What a bunch of rubbish. The more he thought about it, the angrier Killian became. In the end, the entire upper body of the person was a little red, and his clothes were even burned. The surrounding air was a little hot, and the walls next to it even showed signs of crystallization. "Killian, if you don't want to die, you'd better control your emotions." A clear female voice came from behind Killian. Hearing this voice, Killian finally controlled himself. The high temperature in the body also disappeared directly. "Sorry, Maya. I remembered something bad." Killian had an elegant smile on his face. Looks like a standard foreign gentleman. If you can't control your own programming, no one can save you. After saying something coldly, Maya turned and left. Watching Maya leave, Killian's eyes were full of gloom. Half a day later, Killian changed his clothes again and got a new mobile phone. "I want to know how Tony Stark escaped." The person on the other side pondered for a moment before an old voice spoke. "Someone saved him." "Who?" Killian asked through gritted teeth. "To save Tony Stark is to fight against him. He must make this man pay the price." After a moment, the old voice sounded again. "Bruce Wayne's illegitimate son, Jason Wayne. You'd better not underestimate this kid. There is something extraordinary about him." But Killian hung up the phone before he could finish listening to the voice. "Wayne family." A suppressed sound like a beast's roar was squeezed out from between his teeth. Jason didn't know that he had made an enemy out of nowhere. After saving Tony Stark, he returned to Gotham directly in the suit. Have to say, the feeling of flying freely while driving the steel armor is really great. Even if Skynet comes to help him operate it, that kind of feeling is very special and very wonderful. Jason was quite intoxicated. It took more than half an hour. Jason returned to Gotham City from the other side of the world. After a perfect whereabouts, Jason entered his laboratory. As soon as he took off his armor, he saw his advantage. "Bruce Wayne." "Jason, is this the armor you developed?" Bruce glanced excitedly at the very handsome armor in front of him. "Yes, this is the armor I developed." Jason nodded. "What's wrong? You want one too?" Hearing what Jason said, the expression on Bruce Wayne's face was a little twisted. "Ahem, is that okay?" Jason looked at Bruce Wayne, who was pretending in front of him, and rolled his eyes. "If you want it, just say so." Still pretending to be like this. However, considering that Bruce provided him with funds, he generously made do with it. "It has been prepared for you a long time ago. Do you want to come and take a look?" "Ahem, let's go take a look." Bruce Wayne nodded reservedly, but judging from the expression in his eyes, he should be quite expecting it. "Follow me." Jason rolled his eyes and led Bruce towards the armor showroom. "Skynet, call out the armor showroom." Jason gave the order, and the wall in front of him fell down. A transparent warehouse was born. Dozens of steel armors are displayed among them. Among these, there are 3 armors that look very much like bats, very similar to Bruce Wayne's suit. "Call out armor no. B-132, Jason said, and a bat armor moved out of the display cabinet. Try it on and try it. Skynet has an auxiliary mode, so it shouldn't be difficult. The operation of a steel armor is very simple, especially someone like Bruce Wayne, who has very strong mixed martial arts abilities. He has very good control over his body. Wearing armor is no longer a problem. Not to mention, Skynet also has a dedicated auxiliary mode. As expected, it took a short time to adapt. Bruce Wayne has adapted to the operation of a steel suit. The operation started. If you want to experiment with weapons, go to the shooting range. Don't experiment here. Jason said something. Bruce Wayne nodded and walked into the shooting range. Not a moment. The sound of dense explosions came out from the shooting range. 10 minutes later, Bruce Wayne walked out of the shooting range. How do you feel? Jason asked directly. Feel good. The weapon system and identification system of the armor are very advanced. But this armor also has shortcomings. It's just too inflexible. Bruce Wayne took off his armor and moved his hands and feet very uncomfortably. Jason looked at Bruce Wayne and nodded. Bruce Wayne and Tony Stark are still different. Tony Stark is a playboy, and Bruce Wayne is an elite trained by ninjas. Both in terms of will and fighting ability, he is the best among humans. When fighting, he naturally trusts his own hands and feet more. Instead of being completely hidden in the suit like Tony Stark and relying on the suit to fight. Iron Man's body is a suit, while Batman's body is Bruce Wayne. It's no wonder that Bruce Wayne doesn't feel uncomfortable wearing a steel armor that can't move flexibly at all. Chapter 31 Wayne Tower was bombed. In the past few days, Jason has been in the laboratory. Bruce Wayne places a lot of demands on his suit. These make his modification very troublesome. It is not an easy task to convert plate armor into ordinary armor while ensuring defense. Many systems in the Warframe require extensive modifications. Many weapons need to be remade. These are very troublesome. Although Jason doesn't think he's a good person, but he still knows how to repay kindness. Bruce Wayne was really nice to him. He really took on the responsibility of being a father. Bruce Wayne never refused what he wanted. This favor is too big to be owed. Now Bruce Wayne finally has a way to go. Naturally, he wanted to satisfy him. But, in fact, he really felt that giving this armor to Batman was of no use. Before forming the Justice League, Batman really hasn't met many characters with high combat capabilities in Gotham City. Most of Gotham's villains. They are all characters with high intelligence. The original's fighting ability is good, but its superiority and destructive power are high. More often than not, even the opponents are gangsters and gang members in the city. Using this kind of armor is simply bullying. Wearing a battle armor that can fight Thanos and bullying street gangsters. What is this but hooliganism? Jason observed a few minutes of silence for Gotham City's big and small villains. Continue to modify the armor in front of you. Luckily, he didn't work long hours. Alfred walked in with a heavy look on his face. Master, something happened. Jason looked at Alfred with a look of surprise on his face. Mr. Alfred is a very calm old man. He has served in MI6. It is completely possible to do things without being surprised. But now his expression is very ugly, and his eyes are flashing with anxiety. Jason put down the device in his hand and asked, Grandpa Alfred, what happened? Don't be anxious. Speak slowly. The headquarters of Wayne Group was blown up. Alfred took a deep breath and said, What? Jason suddenly stood up from his seat. The headquarters of Wayne Group is a landmark building in Gotham, thanks to the foresight of Bruce Wayne's parents. Wayne Tower has become the most famous building in Gotham City. It is also the face of the entire Gotham City. In addition, this is just the office space of Wayne Group. In addition to employees, there are various documents inside. Being dumber has nothing of value. So since the Wayne Tower was built, no one in Gotham City has caused trouble here. Even the supervillains are the same. It's no good, and it will also lead to crazy revenge from the Wayne Group. Who's going to cause damage here? So Jason found it hard to believe that someone actually dared to do this despite the disdain of the world. Randomly, a surge of anger rose from the bottom of my heart. This is his family's property. Someone in Gotham City blew up the door of his house. The expression on Jason's face suddenly darkened. What are the casualties? 3 employees died. Fortunately, Wayne Tower is big enough. Otherwise, the casualties would be more serious. Alfred said with a solemn expression. Take good care of their families. Jason said, Master is already doing it. Alfred spoke. Have you found out who did it? Jason then asked. No clue at all. Alfred shook his head and said. The camera was destroyed before the explosion. As soon as the security personnel noticed something was wrong, the explosion occurred. And even the experts within the group have not discovered what kind of explosives the other party used. People within the group can't be found out. Jason couldn't believe it. Let's just say it's the trash from the Gotham Police Department. If they can't investigate it, that's a normal operation. It's not something that should be investigated. But if Wayne Group's own scientists can't study it, then it shouldn't be done. Wayne Group also has its own arms company. In the research of explosives, although it is not the first in the world, but it is also at the forefront of the world. It is difficult to say that there is any new type of explosive in the world that even the Wayne Group's laboratories are not aware of. Yes, young master, even the Wayne Group people can investigate it. So the master asked me to ask you, see if you can help investigate. Alfred said with a sigh. Hearing this, Jason nodded. Then don't waste time, Grandpa Alfred. Let's go. Jason said something, picked up a toolbox, and followed Alfred out. Soon, the two arrived at Wayne Tower. Jason saw the first floor of the building seemed to have experienced a dragon spring wind. It was a complete mess. The surrounding area was also frequently blocked. Jason frowned and said directly, Grandpa Alfred, let these people come out. I'll go in and investigate personally. It's the young master. Alfred answered and went directly outside the car. Soon, the building was emptied. The surrounding area was cordoned off by the police. Jason and Alfred went in carrying the box. Go inside the building. Jason looked at the darkened walls around him and opened the box. Dozens of small drones flew out from inside. Skynet, conduct isotope spectrum analysis, C14 positioning spectrum analysis, and establish a three-dimensional model of the site. Scanning. Skynet's voice rang from the phone. Dozens of small drones are like little bees. Under the control of Skynet, the interior of the building is constantly being scanned. Countless amounts of data were collected. The three-dimensional model is being created. Restore the explosion scene. Jason took a look at the data and said, the explosion scene is being restored. Soon in Skynet simulation, a virtual scene was simulated. Only, the source of the explosion was indeed a golden light group, and its true identity could not be seen clearly. Skynet, analyze the surrounding elemental components. Can you find any abnormalities? Analyzing, no stupid compounds found. Skynet's voice rang. Jason raised his eyebrows and fell into thought. Almost all high-power explosives today are products of phenyl and potassium nitrate. The more famous explosives such as C4 and TNT are made from phenyl compounds. But in the environment, he could not detect any traces of these two substances. Not even the remains of other explosives were found. As if the explosion happened out of thin air. Did I offend someone who is proficient in magic? Jason couldn't help but think to himself. Since no explosives were found, he could only think about super ability. But he didn't have any grudge against anyone. Jason frowned, lost in thought. Chapter 32, it turns out that it's you who rushes into the street. I spent a long time investigating inside Wayne Tower. Jason didn't find any clues or clues. Who would come to blow up such a building that is almost useless? Apart from causing some property damage to Wayne Group, there will be no loss at all. Even if you want to kill people, this is not a good place. Wayne Group executives are not here at all. We only come to Wayne Tower when there is a shareholder meeting. But they also took a helicopter directly into the building from the top floor. You can enter from below. Even if terrorists wreak havoc, it will be of no use. And according to Alfred, surveillance is broken. This is not something a terrorist can do. After much deliberation, he decided to ask the old housekeeper in charge of the family. Grandpa Alfred, has our Wayne Group provoked anyone recently? No, master. You also know that our Wayne Group is the largest philanthropic enterprise in Gotham. 60% of the public facilities in Gotham City were built by our Wayne Group. How could we have any enemies? Even if there is business competition, it is impossible to resort to such methods. Alfred shook his head and said, although shopping malls are like battlefields, but no matter how fierce the fight is in the mall, you still abide by the rules. Otherwise, if you blow up my building today and I blow up your building tomorrow, who can still open a company? That's really weird. How could someone attack Wayne Group? Jason was a little puzzled. Suddenly, Jason had an idea. Grandpa Alfred, why do you think these people want to conduct surveillance? Before Alfred could answer, Jason naturally said to himself, unless there are any clues in the surveillance video that can reveal their identity. Jason's eyes lit up when he thought of this. It must be like this. If there were no clues in the surveillance, there would be no need for these people to go to such great lengths to destroy the surveillance footage. All it takes is an explosion. Grandpa Alfred, can I still watch the surveillance? Master, the surveillance was destroyed before the explosion occurred, and the hard drive is damaged and there's no way to recover it. Alfred shook his head and said, not always. Jason licked his lips. Surveillance within Wayne Group was compromised. What about other places? Although Gotham is a shabby city, the transition between old and new is very obvious. But where Wayne Tower is located is the bustling place in Gotham City. The surrounding surveillance video density is very high. Even if the mastermind behind the scenes destroyed a large number of surveillance cameras, he would definitely be able to find the fish that slipped through the net. Skynet, control all surveillance in the 2 blocks surrounding Wayne Tower. Find the outsiders who entered Wayne Group today. Analyzing soon, Skynet's search yielded results. 104 outsiders entered Wayne Tower today, and 103 people are still alive. There is only one man whose traces remain undiscovered. As he said that, a screen appeared in front of Jason. An ordinary-looking man appeared on the screen. At the same time, a very blurry video started playing. Jason could only manage to imagine that the man on the screen entered Wayne Tower. Dodge Marco, a former bald Eagle Imperial Army soldier, retired 4 years ago due to a broken arm. Seeing this, Jason's eyes shrank. The Dodger in the video is obviously a guy with all 4 limbs. Jason's mind was spinning. A thread was connected, able to reborn broken limbs, and capable of suicide explosions. There seems to be only one thing in this world that can do that. Jason's eyes flashed. Skynet, investigate the origin of this person. Look at his schedule and where it comes from. Soon, this Dodger's information was displayed on the screen. This Dodger is a sailor on an oil tanker and just took a plane to Gotham City today. Then came directly to the Wayne Group. Disabled people are hired on oil tankers, and there are philanthropists among the bald eagle oil giants. Jason can be sure that there is definitely something fishy about this tanker. Skynet, investigate the owner of this tanker. This cruise ship belongs to a petroleum company named Elk. Part of this company's shares are secretly held by a Texas-based pharmaceutical company. The chairman of this company is Aldrich Killian. Jason's eyes lit up when he heard the name. As expected, it was Killian who was the deadbeat. The name Killian may not be famous, but Extremis is definitely famous. This virus is derived from recombinant human DNA. It can bring many incredible abilities to people. Almost unlimited self-healing, powerful strength, super reaction speed, and faster thinking. But this virus also has its own shortcomings. That's very uncontrolled. When people's emotions fluctuate, violent explosions may occur. As it was no less powerful, the most advanced explosives were added. Now Jason figured out why no explosive residue was detected. The human body is originally a bomb. How could he be able to detect the remains of explosives? Killian, you are such a loser. How dare you provoke me? Jason gritted his teeth and said bitterly. He didn't bother to go to Killian first, but this guy actually came to his door first. Needless to say, it must have been him who saved Tony. Except for this. He couldn't figure out where to start his feud with Killian. This guy is already a mentally disturbed person. Long-term physical deformity has made this guy mentally sensitive and extreme. After being let go by Tony Stark at a conference in Bern, Switzerland more than 20 years ago, it was even more extreme in my heart. Thinking about revenge against Tony Stark all the time. If Pepper Potts wasn't stronger than Tony Stark, maybe he actually succeeded. He saved Tony Stark. Naturally, Killian, the street boy, hated him. Regardless of how Killian got the news, things couldn't be better between the two of them. It just so happens that I am very optimistic about your Extremis. You actually delivered it to your door yourself. Jason sneered, his eyes flashing coldly. Skynet, activate the violent force plan. Convert all reserved resources into combat effectiveness within 5 days. And immediately locate Killian's position for me. Go directly to this BD to settle the score in 2 days. Jason gritted his teeth and said directly, "It's young master, the plan has been started." Skynet's voice rang on the phone, but within it, there was some solemnity. Chapter 33, Chess Pieces. The production capacity of modern assembly line production is very terrifying, especially under the control of artificial intelligence, a brain that surpasses humans. The efficiency of the machine has reached the highest level, as long as the raw materials are sufficient. The issue of shutdown will not be considered at all. It was just the next day. The assembly factory Jason built underground has built more than 2,000 pieces of steel armor. This is despite the fact that all parts cannot be supplied, although this is only the most basic first-generation armor. But taking it out is enough to conquer a small country. Not to mention, Jason was just taking out a private enterprise leader. Skynet, detect Killian's whereabouts. Target mission has entered the tanker. The tanker has set off from New York Harbor and is heading to the oil country. According to the speed, it will enter the high seas within 1 day. It will reach the predetermined position. Skynet preached in a serious tone. Jason nodded after hearing the report. I don't know if it's to avoid the limelight or something. Killian jumped on the street and ran directly onto the tanker after launching a terrorist attack. Want to drive directly to the oil country. A 10,000-ton oil tanker is very large, no different than a moving fortress. Many people will build their nests on large oil tankers and roam the high seas. I don't know what ulterior motives to do. So does Killian. Extremists is a shameful thing after all. Although human testing is already the norm among large companies in Bald Eagle, but there are still some taboos. In addition, the participants in Killian's experiment were all retired and disabled soldiers. This group of people is very united. If something goes wrong, Killian might not be able to escape in the Bald Eagle's homeland. Therefore, it is very normal for Killian to place his base on an ocean tanker. This also happens to be convenient for Jason. He was also afraid that if he took action in Bald Eagle's homeland, his strength would be discovered by others. Skynet, monitor the traces of this oil tanker in real time. Remind me after entering the high seas. We will act immediately. After saying something to Skynet, Jason turned around and left. Then Jason went to see Alfred the old butler. Grandpa Alfred, I want to secure Gotham Port tonight. No problem, master. The general facilities in Gotham Port were invested and built by our Wayne Group. It's no problem borrowing it for a day. Alfred didn't ask Jason what he wanted from the port. As an old butler, he only needs to do his job well. If Jason were an ordinary child, he would have to educate him a lot. But Jason is a genius. His IQ is no less than that of an ordinary adult, and there is absolutely no need for him to interfere with Jason's behavior. That's great. Grandpa Alfred is helping me secretly contact a transport convoy, Jason said with a smile. He wanted to take action on the high seas, but the biggest problem he faced was how to send all these steel armors to the high seas. Of course, the radar stealth technology on the armor is very advanced, but there are more than 2,000 pieces of armor that can be clearly seen with the naked eye without using radar. By then, I'm afraid the entire Bald Eagle community will be in an uproar. Define him as a terrorist. Jason didn't want to get into trouble. After thinking about it, I decided to dive into the sea. Steel armor doesn't have to worry about seabed pressure at all. Moreover, it cannot be detected by sonar, coupled with the cover of night. He would soon be able to reach the high seas without anyone noticing. When the time comes, he will definitely be able to give Killian a surprise. Killian, who was sailing on the sea, didn't know that because of some of his actions, he was being targeted by Jason. At the moment, he was very angry and roared at his men. Tell me what's going on. Why did he explode suddenly? This is something that shouldn't be done. The expression on Killian's face was very angry. Dodge is one of the few people on his staff who can integrate extremists relatively well. She is usually his right-hand man. He didn't send out the Dodgers for any surprise attack, but to directly assassinate the guy who caused trouble for him. Follow dodges fighting prowess. Assassinating a little kid is no problem at all. Even if the regular army wants to kill him, it will cost a lot, let alone a company's security team. What he didn't expect was, the assassination has not yet begun, and he has high hopes for his men. He actually blew himself up directly at Wayne Group. This made him furious with his group of scientists. Can't you accomplish anything without that woman? If it weren't for my lack of time, why would I give this kind of task to you wastes? I'm giving you 2 days to solve this problem. Otherwise, you will know what will happen. Killian yelled angrily. Several of his scientists looked at each other and left quickly, looking at several scientists leaving. Killian's eyes were filled with haze. Unlike Tony Stark, who was born to be a rich man, he was born in a poor family, and he was born disabled. He spent most of his life working hard to get into a top university and learn knowledge, just to heal myself. But he found that the reality was too cruel. Although he finally cured himself, he had no time to study it himself. He needs to raise the funds needed for research by himself, and the investors have various requirements. He has to work hard to deal with it. And Tony Stark just needs to have fun and do research every day. How could he not hate Tony Stark? Extremis is the way for him to realize his dream. This thing is not stable yet, so he is naturally anxious. As early as a few years ago, the group of people who found him made a series of detailed plans for him. Even he didn't know some of the contents of the plan. All he knows is that light is part of his responsibility. It has already involved the president and vice president of the Bald Eagle Empire. Just this year, the vice president's poor daughter was in a car accident. The leg was directly amputated. This poor child may have to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Extremis is a drug that can reborn a broken limb. Naturally, the vice president's first choice. His purpose, through Extremis, is to control the vice president. After all, it's for the child's father. Nothing is impossible. He just needs to keep Extremis safe. You can complete your task. By the way, complete your revenge. He wants to make those who once looked down on him pay a sufficient price. When I think of this, Killian's pretty face was full of ferociousness. Chapter 34. Can't hit high seas. 10,000 meters in the air. Jason is looking at the tanker below through the imaging device in his helmet. At this height in the air, the originally huge oil tanker seemed unusually small. The view above can only be seen through the helmet. Skynet. Are the steel armor troops in place? The armored army has been deployed. Clean the nearby waters and don't let other ships come over. Expand outage plan. Jason said coldly in midair. A cleanup plan has been implemented. The shutdown plan has begun. All network ports are blocked. Radio silence on. Satellite contact lost. The tanker engine is shutting down. Listen to Tian Wang's methodical report. A sneer appeared on Jason's lips. He will make this oil tanker disappear silently on the sea today. No news can be leaked out. Jason could see through the helmet in front of him. The people on the tanker had begun to panic. Apparently, the sudden shutdown of the tanker alarmed them. However, this was all within Jason's expectation. Modern tankers for convenience. Most are equipped with electric control systems. All activities of the ship are controlled by the central system. Under the invasion of Skynet, all this is in vain. Even if they want to activate manual controls, they will also find that the tanker's propeller can no longer be controlled. This oil tanker has become an isolated island in the sea. The corners of his mouth raised slightly, and Jason flew towards the sea quickly. At the moment, the tanker was already in chaos. Who can tell me what happened? Killian shouted loudly when he saw the mess on the boat. Doctor, our main engine has shut down for unknown reasons. Now we are in the process of restarting. Our external communications have also been cut off. Whether it's the internet, radio, or satellite phone, it doesn't work right now. Killian was stunned when he heard what this subordinate said. He just took a rest. Why did he look like this when he got up? Have they entered the Bermuda Triangle? Not enough, Killian asked, calming down quickly. Find out the reason. Tell me why this happened. After giving the order, Killian walked onto the deck to see if there was any problem outside. Soon, he spotted a flash of fire in the sky. After undergoing the strengthening of Extremis, Killian's vision, hearing, and thinking ability have all been greatly enhanced. Soon he discovered that the fire in the distance seemed to be getting closer. "Come here, prepare for a firefight." Soon, a team of well-trained personnel wearing black combat uniforms came onto the deck. The rifle in his hand was pointed at the sky, waiting for things in the sky to fly down. Soon, the fire in the sky flew over the ship. These people also saw clearly what this thing looked like. This is a white and black armor. It doesn't look like a product of the present at all, but it looks like it came from the future. However, Killian recognized this armor at a glance. He squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. "Jason Wayne." Jason was a little surprised when Killian called out his name all of a sudden. "Hey, since you've heard of me, that's interesting." He had only worn the armor once before. That was the time to save Tony Stark. He knew that Killian was a diehard. Maybe it was because of this grudge that he fell in love with him. Now it seems that it is indeed the case. Moreover, I am afraid that his identity has been leaked for some reason. Otherwise, Killian wouldn't have recognized him at a glance. "Tell me how you got the news about me, and I can consider keeping your body intact." Jason looked down condescendingly. The sound came from the steel armor. Hearing this, Killian laughed angrily. "Ah, it seems you've got us. Don't think that you are invincible just because of this armor. Young people, you must know how to be respectful. Fire and shoot him down." Killian waved his hand, and several well-trained guys around him opened fire. Jason suddenly felt heart palpitations. The rapid heightening caused all these bullets to miss. Skynet analyzed the situation. Skynet directly targeted the people below and the equipment they were wearing through Jason's helmet. After analysis, the firearms in the hands of these people were ordinary firearms. But the bullets fired were special bullets. Hitting the target produces a strong ionization pulse. Can cause fatal damage to electronic equipment. The probability of the armor being damaged reaches 90%. Hearing this, Jason felt palpitated. Fortunately, he suddenly reacted and ran fast. Otherwise, it might really capsize in the gutter. He just saw these people changing magazines for no apparent reason and felt something was wrong. He didn't expect that these guys could really have black technology that threatened him. He remembered it from a movie. The men controlled by Killian can even control steel armor. As expected, we cannot underestimate the world's heroes. "Killian, I didn't expect you to be quite prepared to deal with me. As for those of you who can self-destruct, call them out too. Otherwise, you may really have no chance." Jason shouted below. While stalling for time, he began to call for his Iron Legion. He decided to hurry up and kill this guy, to avoid long nights and many dreams. He always felt that Killian, the street boy, was mysterious. He studies biotechnology. How could there be such a thing that could deal with steel armor? This small ionizing pulse weapon. The manufacturing difficulty is very high. He didn't believe that Killian, a guy like him, didn't even have the money to conduct his own experiments 20 years ago. You can research this technology yourself. There must be someone behind him. So Jason decided, in order to avoid long nights and endless dreams, it's better to kill this guy directly. As for the person behind him, we can slowly trace it. In this world, no one can escape Skynet's pursuit. Killian below looked at Jason flying hundreds of meters in the air with a confused expression on his face. "As for that, flying so high, you are too cowardly. At this distance, even a rocket launcher can't hit anyone. The effective range of an ordinary rifle is 400 meters. The special bullets they use have a shorter range. It was simply impossible to hit Jason from this distance. Go, get the sniper rifle and shoot him down." Killian almost spat out these words through his teeth. He couldn't understand what Jason wanted to do. Was it just to play a trick on him by putting so much effort into interfering with communications and ships? Feilu's 18th anniversary brand upgrade rewards readers. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Grab a deposit now. Activity time. August 10th to August 20th. Chapter 35, Instant Kill. Killian's idea is right. In the hands of a professional sniper, the maximum range of a sniper rifle can even reach 2,000 meters. But the armor that was fighting was not flying in the sky. Under Jason's high-speed maneuvers, the snipers on the tanker had nothing to do with him. "Jason Wayne, what on earth do you mean? Are you just here to take a stroll and don't even dare to fight?" Killian said through gritted teeth. "Sorry, I'm still a kid and can't fight. I just like floating in the sky. What can you do? Jason said from the sky, controlling the loudspeaker on the tanker through Skynet. His armored army is still under the sea. It would take a while to come up, so he would naturally have to delay. When Killian heard this, he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Child, I believe you. Whose rich kid goes to the battlefield? Kill dozens of terrorists without blinking your eyes? Killian thought bitterly in his mind, said directly to his men, "Go get the stinger." Hearing this, the two black-clad team members walked directly to overtime. Jason, who was eavesdropping in the sky, almost fell from the sky when he heard this. After he stabilized his body, he started to curse. Bald Eagle's arms dealer is a FG piece of shit. As long as you have money, you can really take out anything. Stinger's short-range guided missile, but it is used to fly helicopters. The range is several kilometers. Moreover, the missile has an automatic locking system and is not afraid of various maneuvers at all. This thing is used by the military. I didn't expect Killian to be able to get something like this. These arms dealers are really nothing. Thinking of this, Jason didn't stop here. Directly down to Monza, suddenly plunged into the sea. Now, unless Killian buys a torpedo, there is nothing he can do against him. After waiting for a few minutes for his armored army to arrive, Jason came out of the water. "Killian, you are so stubborn. I'm out again. What can you do to me?" Jason flew directly into Killian's face, very arrogantly. But Killian didn't mean to answer him at all and just waved his hand. The two missiles flew directly towards Jason with tail flames. Kissin just floated in midair without moving. Just when the two missiles were about to hit Jason, two figures appeared in front of Jason and blocked the missile. After the flames dissipated, Jason was still floating in the air. There is not even a trace of the SY white armor on his body. There are two more armors similar to the God of Door beside him. Killian laughed loudly below. "Is this what you're good at? Jason Wayne, you really underestimate me. You want to kill me just because of these two scraps of metal?" As he spoke, fire started to appear on Killian's body. A dazzling orange light constantly wandered under his skin, as if there was something alive. The suit on his body also appeared with the fire and was burned directly. As he finished speaking, several more firemen walked out of the cabin. I was a little red from being stepped on by them after working overtime. You see, Jason Wayne, the human body is humanity's greatest treasure. The scraps and scraps of metal on your body are just rubbish. Jason heard Killian's confident words. He curled his lips, said lightly, "Can you fly?" When Killian heard this, it was as if his hat had turned green. He was so angry that he simply lost his mind. "Kill him for me. Where are your missiles? Fire them." Killian gave an order, and the two missiles flew towards Jason again. But on the way, he was directly killed. "Why bother, Aldrich Killian? You can't do anything to me, so you might as well surrender. Maybe I can spare your life." Killian ignored Jason's words and kept ordering his men to open fire. "I really won't give up until I reach the Yellow River." Jason pouted, a wave of his hand. The water around the tanker looked like flowers. Countless steel armors flew out from the bottom of the sea and floated in the air. In a short time, 2,000 steel armors surrounded the entire tanker. The cold steel mask looked at Killian below. The air suddenly became quiet. Looking at the densely packed battle armor around him, Killian held back what he was about to say. The entire deck was filled with the sound of swallowing saliva. "How about it? Can you surrender now? You'd better speak up as soon as possible while I'm still interested in your information. Otherwise, I'm afraid your end will not be very good." Kissin said calmly in midair, unless Killian suddenly took out the infinity gauntlet from his crotch and snapped his fingers. Otherwise, God can't save this guy. Hearing Jason say this, the expression on Killian's face showed some hesitation. By cooperating with others, he also once knew the company behind him. However, the conclusion reached is indeed unfathomable. He had no idea how many people were from that organization. This made him very hesitation. I don't know if I should say it. It seems Aldrich Killian is not going to cherish this opportunity. "Fire," Jason said in an indifferent voice. Wait, before Killian could finish his words, he was buried in blue light. 2,000 pieces of steel armor. Even if a piece of armor fires just once, It can shatter more than half of the hill. This time the salvo fired. The entire upper part of the tanker was engulfed in flames. Looking at the sea of fire below, Jason said, "Skynet, scan for life signals." There are still 4 life signals on the upper deck. Skynet's cold voice sounded from inside the helmet. Jason pouted. Apart from anything else, Killian, a street kid, is really tenacious in his vitality. Extremis. If it didn't have the side effect of exploding at any time, it would really be a good thing. At least his vitality is really the same as that of Ziokiang. Extinguishing. Jason said something, and white crystal blocks began to spray from the arms of the 2,000 armors. This is dry ice. Jason specially installed it to deal with these flames. I didn't expect it to be useful now. After the dry ice is projected, the fire on the ship quickly died down. Jason could finally see the scene on the deck. There are potholes everywhere, and there are even some silver-white metal leaking out. Jason frowned. Killian is a guy who can really make a living. It appears that the tanker has been reinforced. Otherwise, this round of salvo would have left the tanker almost half disabled. Soon, Skynet found Killian lying on the deck, not knowing whether he was alive or dead. At the moment, he was covered in magma color, half red and half black. It looks extremely weird. Chapter 36 Counterattack. Jason has always been a very cautious person. Even though Killian and several of his extremis injected men were half dead, Jason was still very cautious and let a few special armors lock them up. Several armored robots, like huge amounts of iron locks. I think half of it is fixed in the steel plate of the tanker. Locked up all the bodies of several special warriors. Only one head is left outside. Then Jason began to wait for Killian to recover. Extremis is indeed an incredible thing. Killian's head was half gone, but there is still no intention of death. Instead, it is slowly repairing under the influence of red light. Looking at this vitality, Jason was a little envious. This is simply Ziokiang than Ziokiang. I am afraid that without the firepower of a tank main gun, this guy cannot be killed. Soon, Killian's body was repaired. Killian returned to consciousness directly, and it looked as if he was uninjured, with no scars on his face. However, the spirit seems a little depressed. As soon as he opened his eyes, Killian saw Jason. "Aldrich Killian, I think you should calm down now. How about we talk about it?" Jason spoke and glanced at Killian. Killian said nothing, just looked at Jason carefully. "Aldrich Killian, we don't have any big grudges. Why do you need to fight for life and death like this? The people you sent to cause destruction only killed a few ordinary employees. It's nothing, isn't it? There was no animosity between us. As long as you can tell me who is behind you. Maybe I can spare your life. How about that?" Jason looked at Killian very sincerely, as if what he said was true. Killian is not important. Jason knows his details clearly. As for the person behind Killian, he wanted to find out. He remembered that in the movie, Killian kidnapped the president, and he wants to control the vice president's rise to power. Jason didn't believe Killian could do this. The vice president doesn't get to the position just because he wants to. Partisan disputes are not just talk. Besides, when Killian first met Tony Stark at the Swiss conference, he was a poor man who supports his research on extremists, who supported him in contacting the military and finding so many disabled people. If anything, Killian did all of this himself. Jason didn't believe it. If he has the ability, he wouldn't have been so miserable back then. So Jason can be sure that there must be someone behind Killian, or there must be a force supporting him. He must have become enemies with him now. Naturally, we want to know more. If you strike first, you will be stronger, but if you strike later, you will suffer disaster. Thinking about it, Jason looked at Killian very seriously. Ahem, there's no one behind me. Aldrich Killian, this isn't interesting. This cruise ship Boston belongs to Ike Mobile Energy Group, and the price of a 200,000-ton oil tanker is about $100 million US. Aldrich Killian, you're not going to tell me that you paid for the $100 million, right? And the cost of the modification. The cost of building these military naval vessels alone is tens of millions of dollars. The total value of this tanker is at least $200 million US. Aldrich Killian has so much money. What else is he a scientist? Jason said with a smile. 200 million US dollars is 1.4 billion soft sister coins. This is quite a lot of money. If Killian was so rich, how could he be so poor in the first place? Killian's words are just a lie to a fool. Killian was also choked when he heard this. Then, I was deeply hurt by Jason's look at the poor guy. What do you mean? Look down on people? Why can't I afford $200 million? Well, he really can't afford it. Thinking of this, Killian became even more angry. The skin on my body is also getting redder and redder. Jason frowned. Aldrich Killian, I think you'd better control your emotions. I heard that the medicine on you seems to be easy to explode. Hearing this, Killian had a crazy smile on his face. Indeed, it is very easy to explode. Jason saw his smile and immediately planned to retreat. However, he didn't have time yet. There was an explosion of huge amounts of noise right next to it. The restricted armor was blown to pieces. Jason was hit by the blast and staggered. Then he was grabbed by an arm glowing with red light. Jason took a look. It was Killian who was glowing red. However, Killian doesn't look very good at the moment. The other arm disappeared. The entire upper body seems to be exposed like the Terminator's bones. Jason Wayne, you are such a conceited person. Never understand our noble ideals. Feel the pain now. Jason curled his lips when he heard this. Feel your mother. Eat the thunder from my palm. As he spoke, Jason hit Killian on the arm with a hand cannon. Under the bombardment of 2 plasma beam pulse cannons, Killian's remaining arm was directly broken. But the armor on Jason also left a red handprint. The armor around the handprint turned into molten steel. Jason could even feel huge amounts of heat. If it weren't for the powerful performance of the steel armor, he might have been roasted right now. Even so, looking at the marks on his calf, Jason still had some lingering fears. Killian is really ruthless in his fight to the death. He actually blew his own arm, thus breaking free from the control of the armor. He is a ruthless person. Jason's mind suddenly changed. Killian had already bumped into him. Fortunately, Skynet controlled the armor and stood directly in front of Jason. Avoided being warmly embraced by Killian. Skynet, kill him. Jason said something and backed away quickly. Jason ordered. Several special-looking mechas flew over. The 2 arms turned into nozzles similar to fire extinguishers, and white gas shot out directly from them. The white gas disappeared immediately when it came into contact with Killian's body. And Killian's body also turned black. Jason also gasped. This extremis is really fierce. This is liquid nitrogen at more than 200 degrees below zero. Something that can even crack metal. Killian is actually still alive and kicking. He did underestimate Killian at first. Skynet, spray with all your strength, kill him. Jason was afraid of having a long night and having too many dreams, so he spoke decisively. Jason gave an order, and the liquid nitrogen spray speed doubled. Chapter 37 aim on top of the huge oil tanker. White smoke almost filled the entire deck. Jason still underestimated extremis. This kind of virus can generate huge heat in the human body simply by reorganizing human original DNA. In Jason's eyes, it does not comply with the law of conservation of energy at all. He didn't understand why the human body could emit so much heat. It took nearly hundreds of kilograms of liquid nitrogen to freeze it. Even the Hulk should be frozen together with this liquid nitrogen. Fortunately, in addition to liquid nitrogen, the countless seawater around him can also be used by him. 2 water jets 1 meter thick sprayed straight at Killian. Only then did he suppress the fire on his body. It took nearly 10 minutes for the fire on Killian's body to seem a little weak. The whole person turned into a black piece. Seeing this, Jason was still worried. But the armor continued to spray liquid nitrogen. It wasn't until a thin layer of ice formed on Killian's body that he felt relieved. Looking at the human-shaped black lump in front of him that exudes cold air, Jason breathed a sigh of relief. This guy is definitely the toughest enemy he has ever encountered, although the combat effectiveness is not high. But the vitality is amazingly tenacious. He even suspected that this guy was more resistant to being beaten than the Hulk. At least the ability of Broken Limb Reborn is completely inferior to the Hulk. More fierce than Ziokiang. Sighed. Jason wanted to avoid long nights and dreams so that he could survive. Just hit Killian with a hand cannon and smash him into pieces. It turned into black debris on the ground. Thinking about it like this, he probably wouldn't survive. Get exposed to plot missions and extract new technologies. Acquire extremist biomodification technology. Jason was stunned when he heard this system prompt. He looked at Killian, who was already in pieces. Jason didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Is this considered contact with plot characters? Killian probably didn't like this kind of contact. Shaking his head, Jason was not in a hurry to see the newly acquired technology, but instead looked at the oil tanker. Skynet scanned this tanker. Scan completed. The total length is 400 meters. The width is 58.6 meters. The depth is 32 meters. The total height is 72 meters, and the total load capacity is 198,000 tons. Jason nodded with satisfaction after hearing these data. This is simply a behemoth. The length is at least equivalent to 2 playgrounds, and the height is equivalent to 24 stories high. It's no different from a small island, and these things now belong to him. But now there's still some troubles to deal with. There are many people on this tanker, and he wants to see how to deal with them. Skynet, count the number of people on this ship. Inquiry into the details of these individuals to determine whether they have committed any illegal activity. Let the Iron Legion take over this tanker. Jason issued orders one after another. This tanker is very large. Coupled with the modifications of Killian, the street boy, they didn't even have the upper deck in their battle just now. The people below had no intention of coming out. Jason had to hurry up and take them all over. Master, these people want to blow up the ship. Skynet's reminder sounded from inside the helmet. At the same time, a video appeared in front of him. There are some people wearing black special warfare uniforms who are installing bombs in various places on the tanker. The letters AIM are printed on their black combat uniforms. It was those guys who had weapons that could target him. Jason was furious when he saw they were trying to blow up the ship. You actually want to blow up my ship? Skynet, turn off the tanker's power system and prepare to break in by force. Block all signal communication bands and make sure they can only activate the bomb manually. Prepare the bomb-disposable armor and prepare to force your way in. Jason ordered again. However, this time Skynet once again brought him bad news. Master, these people are killing the crew and internal scientific researchers. As he spoke, another video was projected on his helmet. Dozens of black combatants gathered among the crew and scientific researchers. The crazy massacre began. Although these people also want to resist, but flesh and blood is too weak in the face of automatic rifles. Jason's face turned livid when he saw this scene. Stop them immediately and cut through the deck directly. Jason originally didn't want to damage the hull, but now he doesn't care so much. But watching the video, Jason still felt a chill in his heart. What is the organization behind this Killian? To avoid exposure, the massacre unfolded without any hesitation. I'm afraid this is not some second-rate small organization. With a gloomy face, he watched the steel armor using lasers to break the deck and began to think about moving forward inside the tanker. However, this tanker has been modified. The deck was not normally thick, and they were very laborious to cut. Skynet, access the tanker database. Investigate what kind of organization this AIM is, Jason said with a gloomy face. Organizations in the Marvel universe fall into the stars. There are countless secret organizations of various sizes, large and small. Don't tell me that this is a hodgepodge world. There are so many organizations inside. Jason also remembered what kind of organization this was. However, under Skynet's investigation, they could not hide it all. When the time came to find out the details of this organization, he directly told Nick Fury, the one-eyed man. Let him investigate. After all, this is a terrorist organization that supports Killian to replace the president. That's exactly what SHIELD should be responsible for. While guessing who was behind Killian, Jason waited for Skynet to check for information about this organization. After waiting for several minutes, Jason didn't hear Skynet's report on the news, and he couldn't help but frown. It didn't take more than a few minutes for Skynet to check the intelligence of any organization. Why did it take so long this time? Skynet, what did you find out? Master, I only found out that this AIM is a weapons research and development company held by several large groups. It develops various high-tech weapons internally, and Extremis is only part of their research, including the weapons you encounter that can destroy the armor. They're all produced by this organization. Jason frowned when he heard this. Who are these shareholders? Multiple international consortiums, branches of the big family. The ownership structure is very complicated, and even Wayne Group has a stake in it. There is simply no way to determine who owns a controlling stake in this organization. Jason frowned even more when he heard this. This is normal operation for large companies. In order to ensure that interests are combined with each other, many large companies have cross-shareholdings. Even some individual shareholders have various holdings. The ownership structure of some companies may not even be clear to the company CEO himself. An inventory must be carried out by a professional accountant. This suddenly made things complicated. Chapter 38 Massacre. Although high-energy cutting laser consumes very serious energy, but it's extremely powerful. The special military ship steel used to strengthen the hull and deck was quickly opened up by the steel armor. More than 1,000 steel armors continued to pour into the hull. However, in Jason's opinion, it was actually very late. Almost all the crew and scientific researchers inside had been slaughtered. These AM combat troops are very well equipped. Not only does it have special battles, but it also has night vision goggles on its head. Jason turning off the lights didn't bother the group at all. Not as much of a threat as cutting off communications. Try to capture these people alive. If you can't capture them alive, kill them all. See if any of these people are still alive. Jason said to Skynet with a gloomy face. Although these people carry special elixirs, but something like this can threaten steel armor. They're all rare goods. These people don't have much equipment. Soon, they were trapped by the steel armor. However, Jason's wish to capture him alive did not come true. Cyanide. Jason looked at the corpse in front of him with an ugly expression. Already 7 holes are bleeding hope. Cyanide is one of the most toxic chemicals in the world. The fatality rate is high and it takes effect very quickly. Widely used by various dead soldiers. It only takes a few milligrams to kill an adult. It was obvious that these combatants, seeing they were captured alive, simply committed suicide by taking poison. This made Jason even more afraid of this AIM. It is not easy to train dead soldiers, especially in this day and age. Unless you are a brainwashed diehard, it is not easy to have someone sacrifice your life. But this AIM directly took out more than 100 dead soldiers. Suicide without hesitation. This gave Jason a new understanding of the strength of this organization. They couldn't do this just by relying on the things that Tian Fan found out. These guys definitely have a physically isolated database, even a paper database. Jason said with certainty. With the development of network technology, now more and more major forces have established their own physical isolation systems. There is no external network access at all. Some organizations with deep pockets have even established paper databases. It is to prevent the intrusion of various hackers. Jason can be sure that this AIM must have these things in his hands. Otherwise, it would be impossible to cultivate so many dead soldiers just relying on the power he showed on the surface. A country as powerful as Lao Maozi back then. If you want to cultivate dead soldiers, you must use repeated brainwashing. If you look at the Winter Soldier, you will know how much it costs to train a dead soldier. More than 100 people appeared here at once. Skynet divide into small sub-bodies and store them in accessible devices. Jason opened his mouth and gave instructions. There is no unbreakable wall in the world. Even if this group of people sets up a physically isolated database, it is impossible to prevent intrusions 100%. They always exchange data. At that time, Skynet's subbody virus will be able to invade their isolation network and obtain the data he needs. Unless these people really set up a paper database. After thinking about it for a while, Jason put this matter to the bottom of his heart. He shouldn't be able to deal with this organization for the time being. Wait until we find out some information. Skynet, are there any signs of life here? Looking at the corpses in front of him, Jason's face was as dark as water. A large cruise ship has a crew of at least several hundred people. That's still a ship transporting crude oil. A secret base like Killian has nearly 2,000 crew members, scientific researchers, service personnel, etc. in total. And these people were almost all killed by these people. It was pure carnage. In many cabins, blood and water can even reach calf height. If it weren't for the support of the steel armor, Jason felt that he might have knelled on the ground. The population of a heavy town in the Bald Eagle Empire is not that large. If this matter were to be revealed, I'm afraid it would cause an uproar. If no signs of life are found, the body will be identified and buried. At the same time, investigate the identities of these executioners for me. I don't believe it. There's no trace of cobweb horses at all. Jason looked at it for a while and couldn't help it. He left the cabin directly. Skynet, start the investigation from the beginning. I want information from their birth to the present. As long as these people don't jump out of the cracks in the rocks, I will find their traces and send this stuff to Nick Fury at SHIELD, as well as Ames information, send it to him. Jason came out to take a breath of air and said in a deep voice, although he thinks he is not a good person, but seeing so many people die in front of him, he simply couldn't remain indifferent. He didn't expect that these people would be so insane. Send a message to Tony Stark and ask him if he's interested in getting involved. I want all branches of AIM to be annihilated into ashes, Jason said through gritted teeth. Originally, he wanted to take a look at it slowly. Slowly investigate the details of this organization before taking action. It seems completely unnecessary now. This kind of crazy organization should not exist in this world. He can't be a superhero. Some people can do it. He believes that several super agents of SHIELD, as well as Tony Stark, must be interested in dealing with this organization. After thinking about it, Jason looked into the distance coldly. At the same time, at the Delta Wing SHIELD base in New York, Nick Fury, who was engaged in some conspiracy, received an anonymous email. When he saw this email, Nick Fury was a little surprised. This mailbox that accepts mail is a secret mailbox. Not many people know this email address. They're all people he trusts very much. Now that an anonymous email suddenly appeared, he was naturally very surprised. However, half a day later, he saw this email. But after watching it for a few minutes, Nick Fury became a little angry. His face immediately turned a bit darker. Although he is somewhat unscrupulous in order to protect mankind, many of the methods may even seem unethical, but his original intention is still good. That's to protect humanity. How could he not be angry now that he saw the evidence that Jason sent him that confirmed human massacres? However, his many years as an agent still make him very cautious. Go covertly investigate an organization called AIM and Killian Biopharmaceutical Company. With help, don't let anyone know. After giving a few instructions into the earphones, Nick Fury began to think deeply again. The black face was uncertain. He was wondering if this was a conspiracy. Is someone plotting against S.H.I.E.L.D.? And how this changed email was leaked. Chapter 39 Joint Action. Tony Stark is a narcissist, arrogant, and playboy. He has shortcomings like this. But deep down, he is actually a very sensitive and emotional person. And he is very kind. After listening to Jason introduce what happened, he actually agreed with Jason's plan to cause trouble from the bottom of his heart. However, on the surface, he still has to be arrogant. Even so, this kind of matter should actually be left to the police. I'm just an ordinary rich man. Jason could see right through his heart, Xiao Jiujiu. Directly despised. I don't believe you didn't secretly study the armor at home. Besides, you may have stolen a lot from me. Hear Jason say that. Tony Stark was a little ashamed at first, then became angry. Hey kid, what do you mean? What does it mean to steal a teacher? My armor was obviously developed by myself. Tony Stark said plausibly. So, you admit that you study armor? Jason said in a very noisy tone. Tony Stark choked up and wanted to hang up the phone directly. He did borrow a bit from Jason's death path in his armor, but the above technologies were all developed by him. Moreover, when it comes to scientists, can that be called stealing? How could this little kid taint someone's innocence out of thin air? Honestly, how far has your armor research gone? Jason asked curiously. In the original world, there is no such thing as him. Tony actually took a lot of detours when researching the armor. He also made himself covered with scars. But after seeing Jason's finished product, he definitely improved. No comment. Tony Stark said angrily. Oh, then I won't ask. I just want to remind you that you remember to consider the issue of freezing of the armor. If the armor has to be very high, the whole thing will freeze. Jason said in a very relaxed tone. Tony Stark rolled his eyes. You didn't tell me earlier. He almost killed himself once a long time ago. It also messed up the traffic in New York and caused a car accident. Fortunately, there were no casualties. However, what surprised him was that no one had been searched for this so far. Are you involved in that matter or not? They have deep connections with the group of terrorists who captured you. I'm afraid that all of your Stark Industries weapons were paid for by this organization. Jason was afraid that Tony Stark wouldn't join him as a troublemaker. He spoke directly. With 2,000 armors alone, he can indeed kill this organization. But I'm afraid that the next day, he might be invited to tea by Nick Fury. Governments around the world may also put pressure on him. It is not a good thing to have this kind of force and expose it now. Therefore, he urgently needs someone to help him fight the Thunder. Tony Stark was an obvious choice. This guy's father is one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. I have a very good relationship with Nick Fury. There is no way Nick Fury would be suspicious of him. And this guy always likes to be in the limelight, and he just likes to see this kind of thing. Jason, I think this needs to be considered. According to the information you provided, the strength of this organization is relatively small. A lot of their labs are in downtown areas. If we take action, we may cause civilian casualties. Tony Stark pondered for a moment and said, although he is careless, he is not stupid. It's clear what the consequences would be if he actually took action. Do you think you and I are that stupid? We are definitely not making a fuss. The targets of our attack are several secret bases. According to the information I have obtained, these bases are secretly conducting human experiments. We just need to take out these few bases. Others will naturally handle the rest. Jason opened his mouth to explain. Moreover, we can make one vote and run away without revealing our identity at all. I'm afraid there aren't many innocent people in these bases. We just carry out humane destruction. If you don't believe it, I'll give you the darknet addresses of these bases, and you can investigate on your own. Seeing that Tony Stark was unmoved, Jason spoke again. Okay, I will investigate it myself. Tony Stark still agreed without coming up. Instead, he spoke. Although Jason is the eldest son of Wayne Group, he also saved one of his people. Tony Stark wouldn't just believe him. After experiencing being kidnapped, there are only a few people he absolutely trusts. Jason was even on his radar. Otherwise, why could Jason find his location so easily and save him? However, he would never say this. Jason didn't know Tony Stark was suspicious of him. Seeing that Tony Stark still disagreed, Jason spoke again. I'm afraid it won't work if you don't agree with this matter. Actually, this matter has something to do with you. What's the meaning? Tony Stark asked. See for yourself. Jason sent a document to Tony Stark. While Tony Stark was reading the information, Jason explained. At the 1999 Bern conference in Switzerland, did you let someone else's dove go? Which person? Tony said without raising his head. Jason spurted out blood. You don't know how to let go of someone else's love. If you weren't a pig trotter, you would have been beaten to death. Let me introduce it to you, and see if you can remember it. That night, you made an appointment with Aldrich Killian to meet on the rooftop. Then he turned around and slept with a female doctor named Maya Hansen. Leave Aldrich Killian on the roof to dry overnight. Are you impressed? When you say that, it seems to make an impression, Tony Stark said with some embarrassment on his face, although he feels that being a playboy is very glorious. But it was a bit embarrassing for a teenager to say it. But what does this have to do with this matter, and what does it have to do with me? Tony Stark said quickly. Killian is a leader of this organization, and Dr. Maya Hansen is one of the main researchers. Besides, Killian has been investigating your situation. Do you think he wants to have a friendly exchange with you? Also, because the matter of saving you is leaked, our Wayne Tower was bombed by Killian within a few days. Do you think this matter has anything to do with you? Jason asked in a faint tone. Chapter 40 Tony is sour. Jason's questions were very sharp. This made Tony Stark, who is always known for his sharp tongue, somewhat unable to answer. As a genius, Naturally, he didn't think that these people were investigating the situation at his home just to have friendly exchanges with him. Even the structure of his luxurious villa has been carefully investigated. He didn't believe that these people were any good people, but he still argued. Maybe they really came here to be friends. Well, maybe they will fly an armed helicopter to find you and make friends. Jason said in a faint tone. In the movie, Killian's men drove a helicopter gunship directly to blow up Tony Stark's villa. In order to protect his wife, Tony Stark almost died in the villa. To know, there is a no-fly zone near Tony Stark's luxurious villa. All aircraft passing there require approval, although bald eagle routes are easier to approve. But such a glaring armed helicopter almost killed Tony Stark. One can imagine how amazing the energy of this organization is. At least Tony Stark and the others don't take him seriously. Jason didn't think it was a wise decision to face these people alone. Let comrade Tony Stark go out and show off. Regardless of Tony Stark's harsh words, Jason spoke directly. I'll wait for you in the oil country in 3 days. Remember to have ionization protection ready. They have weapons against the armor. After saying that, Jason didn't care about Tony Stark and hung up the phone. Tony Stark cursed a few times. Then he fell into deep thought. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Jason arrived at the appointed place early to wait for Tony Stark. Underground, there are dozens of steel armors that he has prepared. Petroleum country is not an empty high seas. It was impossible for him to use thousands of armors to invade other people's bases in broad daylight. And in this underground base, dozens of steel armors are enough. While looking at the structural diagram of the base from inside the helmet, Jason waited for Tony Stark to arrive. Not long after, a white that was found on the special radar of the armor cruised through the sky at very fast speeds. Tony Stark soon spotted Jason on the ground. He landed on the ground in a very handsome landing posture. Opening his mask, Tony Stark glanced at Jason, seeing that Jason's armor is even more showy than his. He curled his lips. Boy, let's go. The fight will be over soon, and I still have to attend the party. If you say this, you have to head towards the base. Jason grabbed him. Are you going to go directly like that? Not even an investigation. Do you know how many people are in this base? How many weapons are there? Are there any self-destruct devices? Have you figured this out? Jason asked a few questions in succession. The question made Tony Stark's scalp tingle. Looking at his confused look, Jason sighed. Avengers gang. None have intelligence. 2 guys with relatively high IQs are both reckless. Tony is better. The Hulk is even more reckless than him. There was no plan at all. Even Loki, a guy with insufficient IQ, can scheme around the Avengers. It really makes people speechless. Jason even doubted it. If these people weren't pig trotters, they might all be killed. Looking at Tony Stark, who looked confused, Jason could only sigh and said, "This base is used by AIM to conduct human experiments, except for the supply guys who come in every few days. It's full of well-trained members of the organization. There is also a tactical team of 20 people guarding the only entrance. There is a self-destruction device under the base. I have turned it off, but there is still a possibility that they can turn it on manually. So we don't want to fight. Let's fight quickly. Also, you'd better understand that there are no good people in this base." Jason looked at Tony Stark squarely. Then he added, "Even women are not exempted." "Hey boy, what do you mean?" Tony Stark said angrily. "You know it yourself. I think there are a few pretty good-looking researchers here. You better hold on. This group of people seems to be quite short of human body material." After saying that, Jason ignored Tony and spoke directly. "Skynet, send out a team of steel armors to break through the entrance of the base. Then leave no one behind." A trace of cruelty flashed across Jason's face. The experiments done in this base are based on Killian's extremist research. They work on taking out the side effects of extremists. A harmless human body strengthening agent was developed. Creates super soldiers. And this experiment has a very high chance of failure. The human test materials here are replaced almost every day. And in order to ensure the universality of the experiment, their test subjects were all civilians caught nearby. Old people, women, children, all. That's why Jason said there is no innocent person here. With a sigh, Jason looked at the dozens of armors coming out of the underground. Wait for them to break through the base's defenses. Behind him, Tony Stark looked at these different models of armor. Eyes straightened. Have you developed a new armor? Looking at Tony Stark, who was staring straight at him, Jason said nonchalantly, now that we have the main body, wouldn't it be easy to improve it? It's not a big deal. Tony Stark looked at Jason's casual look, feeling sour. Technical improvement is secondary. He could see that these armors were just researched for special functions. The technical difficulty is not high. What makes him sad is that there are dozens of armors. The cost of a single armor is $200 million US. These dozens of armors cost just $101 to throw away. You know, at their peak, Stark Industries' annual profit margin was only this number. For a billion-dollar order, he would go out and negotiate it in person. He also went all the way to the oil country to demonstrate weapons in person. One can imagine how much money $10 billion US is. As for Jason's armors, they threw away a year's profit of Stark Industries. Even he, a famous prodigal, felt a little sad. Are your Wayne family so rich? Oh, are these expensive? Jason turned around and asked. I use materials from home, but I don't know the exact value. Hearing this, Tony Stark almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 41, The Last Laboratory. Tony Stark never imagined it in his life. There will come a day when he is shown off his wealth by others. His father, Howard Stark, established Stark Industries and began selling arms since World War II. He even participated in the development of the atomic bomb. After so many years of accumulation, the Stark family has accumulated considerable wealth. On the surface, he only has assets of more than $10 billion, but the wealth he actually controls is much more than that. But he met the wrong person, the Wayne family. The Wayne family took root in Gotham City when the Bald Eagle Empire was founded. After so many years of development, it is no exaggeration to say that the Wayne family is as rich as any country. Gotham is a city only slightly smaller than New York. In such a city, 60% of the industry is in the hands of the Wayne family. The financial resources of the Wayne family can be imagined. He really couldn't argue with Jason and him showing off his wealth. Looking at the teenage heir to the Wayne family in front of him, Tony Stark admitted that he was really sour. Okay, we can go in, Jason suddenly said. Tony Stark was distracted, but he had been detecting the close combat of the Iron Troopers through Skynet. After he strengthened the ionization protection function of the steel armor. These steel armors are simply overwhelming. Under the operation of Skynet, these armors do not need to consider internal personnel damage at all, and their performance is maximized. Although this secret base is very tightly guarded, it was still broken through layer by the steel armor. After all, this is a battle armor that can compete with alien gods. The weapons of the Earth pose no direct threat to the surface of the armor. It doesn't take a while. These dozens of armors have broken through to the interior of the base. Tony Stark was very surprised by this progress. So fast. Well, what do you think? I've sent dozens of armors. I'm afraid it won't be a problem to conquer a small country. Just attacking a base. Jason rolled his eyes and said, not only is the battle armor's combat effectiveness amazing, Skynet also played a big role in this. The central system of the base is controlled. 50% of the underground base's defense is unusable. Basically, manual operation is required. This progress is not surprising. Ignoring Tony Stark's surprise, Jason spoke directly. Here's the plan. The steel battlesuit is responsible for everything else. The two of us are directly responsible for the core laboratory. Kill everyone you meet on the road. We need to investigate the details of this organization. Having said this, Jason was a little helpless. I don't know the origin of this organization. The protection inside a secret base is so tight. The core laboratories at the lowest level are actually physically isolated. Skynet has no control over this place. In desperation, he had no choice but to do it himself. Tony Stark doesn't care. Coming from a playboy background, he had no idea what the plan was. Just one word. As soon as Jason finished speaking, he rushed out directly. Jason was so angry that he stamped his feet. These superheroes are simply unorganized and undisciplined. In desperation, Jason could only follow. The two were very fast and entered the base in a short time. Under the ravages of dozens of steel armors, the passage to the secret base is actually in a mess. There were flashes of lightning and traces of explosions everywhere. Jason soon found Tony Stark, who was moving forward. He was in a laboratory and didn't know what he was looking at. These people are really beasts. Tony Stark shouted angrily. Jason saw what was in front of him. This is an experiment video from this laboratory. It shows that the scientific researchers in this laboratory are studying the formation mechanism of extremis. Extremis was injected into the bodies of various men, women, and children. Some people cannot handle this virus. Exploded directly. These people are still good. Those who did not die were even more miserable. After being injected with a drug that inhibits the activity of extremis, directly being dissected alive. The purpose is to obtain the most realistic and intuitive experimental data. Jason feels that he has always been a very cold-blooded person, but seeing these scenes, a feeling of anger spontaneously arose in my heart. Tony Stark was even more angry. One shot shattered the petri dish next to it. "Boy, don't leave me alive." Full of anger, Tony Stark said something to Jason and rushed out. Jason glanced at the laboratory and followed. Along the way, the two kept killing, even if someone begs for mercy. They also killed all these people without hesitation. Soon they entered the entrance to the final laboratory. This is also a small laboratory, and there is only one experimenter inside. He's inside a console somewhere. Crazy is operating without knowing what it is doing. I saw two steel men suddenly barging in. The guy in the white coat shivered immediately. Jason raised his arm when he saw it. He knelt directly on the ground. "Don't kill me, don't kill me. I know the password to Lab 0. I am of use. Please don't kill me. I was forced. This guy was kneeling on the ground, kowtowing, begging Jason to spare his life. Jason and Tony Stark looked at each other, then stopped holding the light cannon in their hands. Asked, "What's in this lab?" Inside is where the experimental subjects are located, directly controlled by Dr. Saw, the person in charge of the base. I don't know about the rest. This scientific researcher in a white coat is obviously not a character with integrity. As soon as Jason opened his mouth, he directly revealed all the base's background. "How on earth do you get into this laboratory?" Jason glanced at the guy. Although we know from the structural diagram of the base, there is a final laboratory here. But in their current view, there is no trace of this laboratory. There is only a metal wall of huge amounts in front of them. It fits perfectly without any trace. If someone is not a housekeeper, he will enter from inside. Jason even felt that there really was no laboratory here. The door of this laboratory is made of heat-resistant aerospace alloy 2 meters back. Can only be opened with a password. I know the password. Don't kill me, don't kill me. The man in the white coat directly begged for mercy. I'm going to try to see if what this guy said is true. Tony Stark stepped forward, the red laser on his finger glowing. Chapter 42. Scheming to be honest. Jason didn't believe what the young man kneeling in front of him said. High-temperature and heat-resistant aviation alloy is a unique material of Bald Eagle Aerospace Administration. Even if there's a small outflow, the quantity will not be too much. And there's always been a price, but no market, and the price is very high. It is understandable that it is used in various high-tech equipment. To build a gate, Tony Stark, a loser, doesn't have such luxury. However, he just thought about it. Tony Stark came back with a gloomy face. It's a high-temperature, heat-resistant alloy. My laser can't cut it. Jason was also shocked when he heard this. What a prodigal organization this is. Can this alloy be used to build doors? Are you crazy? When Tony Stark saw Jason, he had no choice but to say in a deep voice, "Open the door, don't play any tricks." Thanks. The guy in the white coat said with great gratitude, etc. Seeing this guy walking towards the console, Jason stopped him. "Sir, what's the matter?" The guy in the white coat forced an ugly smile on his face. The folds on his face were almost bunched together. He looks like a poor, lonely old man. "Nothing. I'll give you some insurance." Smiling, Jason took a collar from the steel battle suit behind him. It was put directly on this guy's head. Drip sounds softly throughout life. The electronic collar was worn tightly around this guy's neck. What is this? The researcher in a white coat asked with a smile that was uglier than crying. Nothing, just an explosive collar. This collar contains special explosives. As long as I have a thought, this cute decoration will explode with a power equivalent to 10 kilograms of TNT. A kind smile appeared on Jason's face. Then he continued, I think you should understand the effect of this thing exploding. So, I wonder if there is anything you haven't added yet? A bright smile appeared on Jason's face, but this smile looked like a devil to the researchers opposite him. The scientific researcher in a white coat forced an ugly smile on his face and said, I did forget something just now. There are 3 high-energy laser emission tubes in the passage of this laboratory. If you enter the wrong way, it will start. But don't worry, these things can be turned off outside. Then what are you waiting for? Why don't you lock them up? A gentle smile appeared on Jason's face. Looking at the scientific researchers opposite, I shivered. Right away. The scientific researchers in white coats stumbled up to the console and began to operate. After seeing him pass by, Jason looked towards the door of the laboratory. Tony Stark looked at Jason with a strange expression. After a long time, he said, What did Bruce Wayne teach you? Why do you look like an old fox? Mr. Stark, if you grew up living in the slums of Gotham, you wouldn't ask this question. Jason smiled and said no more. Leave it to Tony Stark to experience it himself. Gotham is the busiest street, and it is also full of thieves. What a slum looks like is beyond the imagination of a young man like Tony. He had spent a long time in that kind of place. Tony Stark looked at the expression on Jason's face. Didn't ask any more questions. I just made up my mind to visit the slums of Gotham in the future. While the two were chatting, the unlucky guy they caught had already opened the door. All right, the unfortunate guy said something. The door in front of them slowly opened. The originally tight metal was opened amidst a series of mechanical noises. A long passage leaked out. Jason looked at the metal door and twitched the corner of his mouth. He said why Skynet has no role here. This gate turned out to be completely mechanical. Presumably the only electronic component is on the console directly connected to it. If Skynet can be opened, there will be ghosts. After glancing at the door, Jason turned his attention again to the unlucky guy they had caught. Hey, are you sure there's nothing wrong? Never fail to speak up if you have a problem, because you may be the first person to walk through this passage later. And the coil bomb around your neck is specially made. You need to stay connected to the external network at all times. Otherwise, there's going to be a bang. You must be sure you have nothing to say. Hearing Jason's words, the prisoner in the white coat almost cried. Also, there is still a little problem. The hand cannon in Tony Stark's hand was raised directly. Tony, stay calm. Jason stopped Tony Stark to snap his fingers. Then the prisoner they captured in front of them started to tremble as if he had been electrocuted. It took half a minute to listen. Then he knelt directly on the ground. This is your punishment for lying to us. You have to think clearly. If anything happens to us on the way down, we may not die, but you will definitely die. So don't do anything unwise. Upon hearing this, the scientific researcher in a white coat pursed his lips. Then he spoke. No more, no more. Jason looked at his condition and nodded with satisfaction. That's okay. Just lead the way. Jason pointed with his chin, and the scientific researchers in white coats walked towards the passage. With this guy walking in front, Jason and Tony Stark followed suit. Soon, they entered the final laboratory. The laboratory space is very large, about the size of a football field. As soon as he entered the door, Jason saw 5 or 6 large culture tanks. Inside were naked human beings. They looked no different from ordinary people. What is this? Tony Stark said after scanning the week. This is the ultimate laboratory body for the laboratory. Biological weapons developed at the research base. Extremist warrior. The scientific researcher in the white coat said in a faint tone. Oh, extremist warrior, you sound awesome. I don't know how effective it is in combat. Jason looked at the experimental subjects in the petri dish with interest. You'll be able to see it soon. Once the laboratory is opened, the experimental subjects inside will wake up. Kill any enemy in front of you. The scientific researchers in white coats had arrived behind the petri dish at some point. he said in a faint tone. Chapter 43. Centipede Warrior, you really have a problem. You are the person in charge of this laboratory, right? Jason looked at the scientific researcher who had removed the collar from his neck at some point and said with a smile, "How did you know?" The scientific researcher in a white coat frowned and said, "Nonsense, this kind of place. How can there be low-level personnel? Even if you're not the person in charge of the base, you're definitely a big fish, and you'll definitely be right to catch it," Jason said in a very relaxed tone. He didn't bother to care who the leader of this base was. Just kill everyone in the base. Then there is no need to worry about anyone escaping. The guy in the white coat almost spat out a mouthful of blood when he heard this. He thought there was something wrong with his acting. Unexpectedly, I met a reckless man. It gave him the feeling of hitting cotton with a fist. I feel very uncomfortable in my heart. Aren't you afraid of accidentally hurting innocent people? What? Are there any innocent people here? Jason said with surprise on his face. Hearing this, Daco vomited blood again. There certainly seemed to be no innocent people in his laboratory. Forget it. I won't talk nonsense to dying people. The white coat saw that he couldn't defeat Jason. He sneered and didn't talk to Jason. It's as if you can talk nonsense better than me. Jason retorted. Jason wanted to say a few more words, but was stopped by Tony Stark. Follow Tony Stark's gaze. The 5 experimental subjects in the Petri dish didn't know when they had opened their eyes. He was staring at the 2 of them with emotionless eyes. What are you looking at? Fire! Jason screamed strangely and raised his arms. The javelin armor-piercing bullet in his arm was fired without saying a word. The armor-piercing bullet directly penetrated the thick culture glass. An explosion occurred directly inside. There was a flash of fire. Countless amounts of culture fluid were blown into the air, suddenly blocking the sight of 2 people. Wait until the culture medium that blocks the view falls to the ground. Only then did the 2 of them see the scene behind them. All 5 experimental subjects woke up. The armor-piercing bomb directly ripped open the skin and flesh. However, although the flesh on his body was exploded, but recovering quickly, Jason could even see the growing buds on his muscles. And Jason noticed, when these experimental subjects are repairing their bodies, there was no fire flashing from his body. It's like the side effects are completely fixed. You should feel honored. You are the first and only ones to see the Centipede Warriors. You should be lucky to be able to find my base. You should be lucky to die in my hands. The white coat said a few words frantically. The emotion in his eyes was very passionate. He is completely different from the cowardly guy just now, who doesn't know how to brag. You have the ability to let these soldiers beat my brother. If I can beat him, I lose. Jason sneered directly. Hey kid. Tony Stark trembled when he heard Jason's betrayal of his teammates. These 5 seem to be difficult to deal with, and he may not be able to defeat them. Brother, hold on for a while. I'll call for reinforcements. Jason turned around and ran away without saying a word. He didn't know what was going on with these 5 experimental subjects, so he didn't want to fight with these guys whose combat capabilities were unknown. He has 50 steel armors. Wouldn't he call them over to fight in a group? I don't know what happened to this white coat. In this laboratory, he couldn't contact Skynet at all. You can only go out and find someone. However, he had just set off. The door you came in from just now was closed silently. I just want to leave now. Don't you think it's too late? The white coat laughed wildly and said, Ciao. Jason saw the door closed and didn't say much. He immediately turned back and shouted, Tony, let me help you. Shet. Tony Stark was also shocked by Jason's shamelessness. If Jason hadn't turned around and ran away, he really thought Jason was a good person. But now is not the time to push each other away. The experimental subjects have already come forward. Tony cursed fiercely and drove his armor directly towards him. It's just that it just flew up. He was kicked to the wall by the experimental subject. Be careful. They are very powerful, Tony Stark said angrily. Jason glanced at Tony Stark. Just know what's going on. Even though the jet propulsion device on the steel armor is inconspicuous, but the thrust provided is very powerful. It can even propel small rockets. But Tony Stark was kicked back. Of course, there are reasons for him to underestimate the enemy, but this also shows that the strength of these warriors cannot be underestimated. Jason understood. The ones who decided not to come into direct contact with these experimental subjects were those who wanted to fight these experimental subjects through the maneuvers I told them. However, these experimental subjects are much smarter than Jason imagined. In other words, his combat intuition is very strong. The two experimental subjects came directly to intercept Jason with Jason's hand cannon. The laboratory looks quite small, though. But in front of these guys whose physical fitness is not ordinary, it doesn't seem like the area is that big. Jason was quickly cornered by several experimental subjects. Correspondingly, these experimental subjects were also beaten to pieces by Jason's weapons. Looking at these experimental warriors rushing toward him, Jason's eyes shrank. One of the subjects was hit the hardest by his weapon. The bones in the body have been exposed. Only, his bones are not the white color of ordinary people. It is metallic silver white with some yellow in the middle. Jason took a deep breath. 2 rocket nests sprouted directly from the shoulders. A dozen small rockets were launched directly from his shoulders. Then they were all concentrated on that experimental subject. After the fire, almost all the skin and flesh on the experimental subject was blown away, leaking out the bones beneath the skin. Seeing these skeletons, Jason gasped. The internal skeleton of these experimental subjects has been completely replaced, all replaced with metal structures. The silver-white metal is dotted with yellow crystals that are constantly flashing. It looks like centipede limbs, and there seems to be yellow light constantly flashing inside those yellow crystals. As these yellow crystals continue to flash, the test subject's muscles also began to heal rapidly. It was completely healed in a short time, even worse than Killian's healing ability. Jason secretly thought something was wrong, although the attack power is not very strong. But the recovery ability of these experimental warriors is really terrifying. In case the armor's energy is exhausted, they became lambs to be slaughtered. Chapter 44 Pulse Explosion compared to Jason, who can barely hold on. Tony Stark on the other side is even worse. He was forced into a corner by 2 experimental soldiers and beaten violently. If the armor hadn't been very strong, Tony Stark would have gone to hell by now. Seeing how dangerous the situation was, Jason gritted his teeth. The fingertips flashed red. 10 laser beams shot out directly from his fingers. The energy of the armor also decreased rapidly, reaching half of it. After all this energy was expended, the effect was astonishing. The 3 experimental warriors surrounding him were cut in half. One of Tony's experimental subjects was being beaten up over there, and his head was split in half. Jason flashed with joy. I want to take advantage of the victory and pursue it. But unexpectedly, the 3 experimental warriors in front of him seemed not to be affected at all. The wound on his waist healed quickly, and he continued to attack Jason. Jason's expression changed drastically. Tony, do you have any ideas? If this continues, we will be killed. Jason yelled at Tony Stark. If I had my way, do you think I would still be beaten here? Thanks to Jason for your help. One of the test subjects besieging Tony Stark dies. He finally had a chance to fight back. The fight with that experimental subject was back and forth. It's just that Tony Stark is a playboy, so he is no match for this kind of war machine. It was said to be a sparring, but it was just relying on the strength of the armor to hold on. The hand cannon in his hand kept firing to buy himself some time. Tony Stark, you idiot. How can you not defeat anyone? Jason shouted very, very corruptly. Tony Stark was filled with indignation when he heard this. But what they told was the truth, and he really couldn't refute it. He could only fire at the experimental subject in front of him depressedly, venting his anger. The experimental subject in front of him retreated. The body even trembled a little. Jason's eyes lit up when he saw this. He kept dodging. The plasma light in hand is not much used as the pulse cannon. He didn't expect that this weapon would be effective on these experimental subjects. Jason took a deep breath. An emergency stop in flight. The arc reactor on the chest emits a strong light. A beam of light as thick as a seed bowl shot out directly. The experimental subject in front of him had been shot in the front. The skin on my chest has almost disappeared. The silver-white metal creation inside leaked out. Moreover, the whole person seemed to be shaken, trembling constantly. The experimental soldier next to him quickly blocked the stopped experimental body. Blocked Jason's follow-up attack. It doesn't take a while. The experimental subject began to continue repairing. Jason's eyes lit up when he saw this. Effective. The metal equipment inside these experimental bodies will be affected by the pulse. However, the medium pulse is not strong enough. It is simply impossible to kill these experimental warriors at once. Jason's mind was spinning rapidly. Next to him, Tony Stark was being beaten crazily. Jason's eyes suddenly lit up when he saw Tony Stark being beaten and being pinned to the ground, unable to move. Tony, plasma beam pulse weapon, full power output. Come for me. You're crazy. Although Tony Stark was beaten violently again, still shouting lively. Don't ask so many questions. Trust me, Jason shouted while avoiding the attacks of these experimental warriors. What a madman. Tony Stark muttered something. The plasma beam pulse weapon in his hand emitted a blazing light. Jason's eyes lit up when he saw this. It fell directly to the ground. 18 mechanical claws emerged from the armor beneath his feet. It was nailed directly into the alloy plate under your feet. Raise your hand. The same beam was launched and met the beam in Tony Stark's hand. As a result, the experimental subject's combat intuition was very sensitive. Seeing that the situation was not good, he attacked Jason crazily. Only, after losing that extraordinary high-energy heat, the attacks of these experimental subjects posed no threat to Jason at all. After dozens of seconds, with the two blue beams touch, a huge amount of blue light ball appeared. Then, blue light filled the entire laboratory. The dazzling electric current raged throughout the laboratory. There were traces of burnt black marks left on the silver-white laboratory. Wait until the blue electric current disappears. Jason just saw the scene in the laboratory. The entire laboratory became a mess. The large and smashed equipment in the laboratory was directly reduced to black fragments. Several experimental subjects were also lying on the ground. I don't know life or death. Boy, you are such a madman. Tony Stark moved his armor. Each other. Jason also coughed and smiled. He complained in his heart. You invented this trick yourself? It is not certain who is the madman. With a groan, Jason scanned the laboratory for a week. Where did that white coat go? Tony Stark also raised his head and looked at the tempered glass over there. The white coat that was there just now has long since disappeared. He was still there just now. He must have sneaked away. Tony Stark said in a deep voice. Let's go out and take a look. He can't escape. Jason said in a deep voice. The structure diagram of the base didn't say anything about it. There's a secret passage behind this laboratory that could be left secretly. This guy should have built it himself. A guy who is so afraid of death should not be a dead soldier of AM. As long as you catch him, you might be able to find some secrets of this organization. After hearing Jason's words, Tony Stark nodded in agreement. The two worked together to break the tempered glass of the control room. Open the door to the laboratory. As soon as the door opens, several pieces of steel armor flew in. Jason quickly went up and changed into a suit of armor for himself, then walked out of the laboratory. Tony Stark looked at his armor, which had little energy left. Let's take a look at the armor Jason changed. My heart felt sour again. Jason didn't know what Tony Stark was thinking. Skynet, requisition the Bald Eagle military satellites in this area. Look where this guy went. This area is almost a desert. It's not easy to hide traces in a place like this. He believed that Skynet would soon be able to search for this escaped guy. The young master dropped off a jeep 10 kilometers south. Hear the news. Jason's eyes flashed slightly. He activated his armor directly and flew outside. Tony Stark yelled loudly as he fell behind him. Wait for me, wait for me. As he said that, he also wanted to catch up. It's just that I took a few steps. The armor doesn't have much energy left. He had no choice but to stay where he was, cursing at Jason constantly. Chapter 45. Lord of the Rings collaboration. The top speed of the steel armor can even reach Mach 5. Under Jason's full attack, 10 kilometers is just a blink of an eye. Soon, Jason locked the Jeep in his combat system. Jason accelerated, flying directly in front of the Jeep. The white coat saw Jason falling from the sky. A dragon swung its tail, just walked around in the desert. randomly looked at Jason fiercely. You really are haunted. The ghost lingers. This statement is not accurate. Don't you know what you did? I feel like I'm doing justice to God at best. Jason said with a sneer. Ridiculous. Do you know what research I'm doing? If my research is successful, there will no longer be people with disabilities in the world. The average human lifespan could also be improved. The white coat said in a feverish tone. Jason curled his lips when he heard this. The most annoying thing is this kind of villain who thinks he is doing good things. He didn't see any signs of longevity from those experimental subjects. Instead, after suffering a pulse blast, the electronic equipment inside their bodies even exploded. The corpses were burned to ashes by the extremists flowing out of the mechanical skeletons. This is not something you could use to make a medical device. Is this your excuse for killing so many people? Then can you tell me why those experimental subjects were directly transformed into biological weapons? If I'm not wrong, they should only have a few months to live. Jason said with a sneer. Skynet has already analyzed these experimental subjects. In this world, there is no energy that can appear out of thin air. The cost of these experimental subjects gaining super resilience and combat effectiveness. It's about burning life force. When they emerge from the petri dish, they only have a few months to live. After a fierce battle, lifespan is even shorter. It is not impossible to turn a lifespan into a few weeks or a few days. This white coat is just an excuse for what he did. Sure enough, I heard Jason's words. The white coat's face was full of anger. You don't understand at all. This is just a necessary sacrifice on the road to success. Their sacrifice of life is valuable. Then why don't you sacrifice yourself? Jason smiled. If this guy goes up first himself. Jason looked up at him. But he only experiments on others and lives well by himself. Only if you can believe what he says is there a ghost. The white coat gave Jason an angry look. Then quickly calmed down. I don't have to argue with you. You're going to die anyway. Death? Are you kidding me? Jason glanced at this guy in surprise. He had already used the combat system in the armor to detect it. This guy shows no signs of being reformed at all. Only then did he dare to chase him out alone. Otherwise, he would have brought dozens of younger brothers over to start a group fight. Haha, do you think I was kidding you just now? Look at your feet. A wild smile appeared on the white coat's face. Jason was shocked when he heard what he said. Just lower your head and look down. A layer of white frost had condensed on the armor under his feet at some unknown time, and it is spreading rapidly upwards. Jason's pupils shrank suddenly. This is a desert. Daytime temperatures can even reach 50 or 60 degrees. In this weather, white frost actually condensed on his armor. How can this be? Jason felt something was wrong. Just kill the white coat if you want. But he found out. The hoarfrost has already spread to my chest. The armor cannot move at all. Even inside the armor, he could feel a little bit of chill. How can it be? Jason exclaimed. The steel armor is not only very strong in resistance to attack. Temperature isolation is also achieved to the extreme. Liquid nitrogen was sprayed directly on the armor, and he couldn't feel it inside. Now he felt a bit cold and biting. One can imagine how cold the temperature is with the thin layer of frost and snow outside. Skynet detects outside temperature. Master, according to the sensor detection, the temperature outside is even close to absolute zero. This is simply impossible. Skynet said, very surprised. Jason thought it was impossible when he heard this. Absolute zero is a concept that is simply impossible to achieve in physics. Reaching absolute zero, even a movement of electrons inside molecules stops. The heat will all disappear. Low temperatures close to absolute zero are not scientific at all. While Jason was still shocked, the white coat spoke again. You can't even imagine the power of the Supreme Lord of the Rings. Go to hell. With that said, the white coat drove the military jeep directly towards Jason. Jason was knocked straight out. Warning, warning, the armor is 80% damaged. Jason's face turned green when he heard this report. The experimental subjects were helpless, and he almost overturned the car in front of an ordinary person. Fortunately, the steel armor strengthens its survival ability. Only in this way could his life be saved. However, he doesn't have any fighting ability now. Skynet, control the mechanical armor to stop him. Jason shouted through gritted teeth. It's the young master. Skynet fell silent, and the armor went to chase the person. Jason was thinking about what the white coat said about the Supreme Lord of the Rings. Is there still a collaboration between Marvel and Lord of the Rings? But the Lord of the Rings doesn't have this kind of ability. Thinking of the frost that silently freezes the armor, Jason shuddered immediately. Fortunately, he put on the steel armor. If it was his body just now, he will be frozen into a popsicle immediately. Thinking of this, Jason became even more angry at this guy. I don't know where this guy came from. There are so many weird things about me. With gritted teeth, the new armor has arrived. Jason once again put on a new suit of armor. Skynet, try to capture that guy alive. Master, we failed to capture him alive. Skynet said helplessly. What's the situation? Jason asked with a frown. Go and see for yourself. Skynet said again. Jason frowned and flew into the sky. The Jeep in the white coat didn't drive very far. It's only a few hundred meters away. Soon Jason found him. Only, the white coat at the moment has turned into an ice sculpture. Even his Jeep was frozen together. There is desert all around, but in this clearing, an ice sculpture appeared out of thin air, still exuding cold air. Even Jason couldn't help but shudder when he saw this scene. Looking at the ice sculpture in front of me, Jason's face dropped. This is obviously the person behind it who is trying to kill people and silence them. Chapter 46. Single-dimension energy manipulation device on the desolate desert. A huge black plane was parked in the middle of the desert. Next to the plane, Jason was operating several instruments to examine the ice sculpture in front of him in detail. Next to him, Tony Stark was also amazed. What the hell is this? It's incredible. Tony Stark looked at the data on the machine. His eyes were full of surprise. Temperature is a very interesting concept. Its existence is actually just a relative concept defined by humans. Because the temperature of a substance is not static, there are countless heat exchanges between objects. Radiation, conduction, contact. These three modes of heat conduction. The temperature of an object with abnormal temperature eventually tends to the average temperature of the environment. But the ice sculpture in front of me is different. While heat exchange is taking place, but the process is extremely slow. It's been several hours and it's still frozen. And there was no sign of melting. This simply does not conform to modern concepts of thermodynamics. Who knows what this is? It may or may not be magic. After some initial surprise, Jason quickly accepted the fact. There's nothing surprising about this. The Ancient One gang can open wormholes, create subspaces, change timelines, and use energy to produce the effects of physical weapons at will. Now an ice cube that won't melt. That there doesn't seem to be anything strange about it. He is not scientific about magic. Tony Stark frowned when he heard Jason say this. Where is the magic in the world? This must be a technology we don't understand. Just say yes. Jason said helplessly. What is the difference between overly advanced technology and magic? A new Imperial fighter defense network. The network formed using energy can even destroy Ronin's physical battleship. Create artificial intelligence. It can even interfere with reality to some extent. Has mind control ability similar to mutant. In their opinion, this technology is no different from magic. It's simply not something they can get their hands on now. You have studied the infrared spectrum and electron tunneling spectrum of this thing. Have you found anything? Jason yawned and lay down on the sun lounger he had obtained, and took a sip of the iced drink. He spoke a little carelessly. Nothing to discover. It's just plain ice. But the structure is extremely stable, and the heat doesn't even escape. It's incredible. I have to continue researching to determine what this is, Tony Stark said, while looking at the data together without looking back. Jason could only curl his lips helplessly when he saw this. This may be the difference between geniuses and ordinary people. You can study this kind of thing. Perhaps countermeasures can be developed. Tony Stark has done this kind of thing more than once. He even developed anti-Thor armor, specifically against Thor. This is a tough guy. Jason admitted that he couldn't afford it. While Jason was in a daze, Tony Stark suddenly screamed strangely. Not good. The energy structure inside the crystal undergoes a chain collapse. When Jason heard this, he jumped up from the sun lounger. Has any external interference been detected? Jason asked in a deep voice. In his opinion, this was obviously caused by the people behind the scenes extracting the energy from the ice. No fluctuations were detected. Electromagnetic waves, molecular spectroscopy, and infrared spectroscopy have not been discovered. The expression on Tony Stark's face was very ugly. The ice in front of them was melting rapidly. It takes dozens of seconds. The ice crystals on the surface have melted. The white coat turned directly into a piece of mincemeat. The Jeep remains unchanged, though. But Jason knew. This means that the metal structure inside the car has been damaged. With just a little outside courage, this Jeep could turn into a piece of junk. Tony Stark couldn't care less about nausea and mysophobia. He walked up directly with the machine. Wanted to take a chance and see if I could detect anything. Jason originally wanted to go up too. He just took 2 steps and then stopped. Congratulations to the host for getting in touch with the plot characters. Extract single-dimensional energy manipulator manufacturing technology. Congratulations to the host. Homologous data has been detected. Extremist body modification technology enhanced. A new branch of centipede endoskeleton modification technology has been added. You hear system beep. Jason was delighted. The eyes looking at the white coat became surprised. I thought it was a bit part character without a name. I didn't expect there to be a surprise. 2 technologies can be extracted from his body. Isn't this the kind of treatment only a destined son like Iron Man gets? After being delighted for a long time, Jason began to check out the system's technology. Centipede endoskeleton modification technology. It should be the technology used on the experimental subjects. Just this kind of thing. Jason himself will definitely not use it. He still prefers the original stuff inside his body. The other single-dimensional energy manipulator should be the kind of technology that can produce super low temperatures. Kissin looked at it carefully. After reading the information for a long time, Jason suddenly spoke. Try using an atomic absorption photometer. Tony Stark was startled when he heard this. Then react quickly. Do you want to measure the absorption of characteristic radiation here to analyze what external energy is here? You are such a genius. Tony Stark said something. Using a mass spectrometer to do spectral analysis. I think we should be able to find something by combining the 2. Jason added. You compare atomic absorption spectra and find anomalies in them. Tony Stark asked. Yes, we can't see anything on the surface, but it's not necessarily possible to separate out the particles. Such freezing must have some effect on the interior of a molecule. By comparing the normal structure of matter, we might be able to find something that plays a role in it. Jason said. How did you come up with that? Tony Stark asked strangely. Jason chuckled inwardly. I definitely know the answer after reading it. He knows how to make all the instruments. Don't you know how to detect the energy in it? But of course he couldn't say that. Explained. That's how I suddenly thought of it. I said this might be caused by magic. So I wanted to detect the energy inside. Of course we have to find domestic testing methods. That's okay too. What a piece of shit luck. Tony Stark said a few words helplessly. Continue to check. Jason looked at Tony Stark, who was working peacefully. He smiled and lay down on the sun lounger again. Chapter 47, The Powerful Extremist, the Genetic System, is a very complex system. The expression of genes cannot be accomplished solely by relying on the DNA in the human body. Rather, there are many complex ingredients. The translation of a string of deoxyribonucleotides into a small piece of protein biomolecule in a small cell requires a very sophisticated and complex auxiliary and regulatory system, such as various mRNAs, RNAs, various RNAs, various primers, various templates, various enzymes, various transport proteins, and various molecular chaperones. The file size subunit of the ribosome, free radicals that interfere with translation, and unwinding enzymes can be found everywhere. These are the products of human gene duplication. To understand genes, understanding these is still not enough. Enzymes and templates that check whether the bases are correct, enzymes that cut out wrong bases, enzymes that move the correct bases to the right positions, and countless other details. These details determine whether a gene is copied accurately, and any change will paralyze the entire process. Moreover, these enzymes, mRNAs, transporters, and chaperones all come from their own production combinatorial systems, and changing them requires changing these systems. Therefore, genetic modification is a very complex thing. It's so complicated that if humans want to master it, the time and experience it takes is probably unbearable for most people. The transformation of the body by extremists is a transformation process based on the reorganization of human DNA. Use changes in DNA to control the transcription of enzymes in the human body to achieve the purpose of rapidly dividing cells and repairing injuries. High temperatures that damage the human body. It's just a byproduct of the process. Although it is powerful, it has no effect at all. If extremists really gets developed right, it really may become a new medical technology, repair the human body, and enhance human lifespan. After system strengthening, extremists has become much more perfect. The side effects of extremists are virtually eliminated. It cannot be said to be eliminated. Instead, this side effect is reduced to a level that the human body can tolerate. By prolonging the repair time, the side effects of explosion can be reduced. The more you read this technical information, Jason felt more and more unfathomable. This virus originates from plant cells. It is simply unbelievable that he has been transformed by the system to this point. Skynet will build a biological laboratory for me. At the same time, we started cultivating the first-generation strain of extremists. Be prepared to do research. Jason ordered to Skynet. A virus is a living thing after all. It is not like a machine that can be manufactured by assembling parts. Virus modification is a very complex process. It takes a long time to induce evolution to obtain the performance humans want. It's the same food we eat now. Many years ago, these plants may have been poisonous. It is under the training of generations of human beings. Only then did they become usable by humans. Viruses are like this too. In order to prevent them from destroying the original structure inside the human body, extremists requires long-term cultivation. Only virus samples that can be used are selected and implanted into the human body to produce corresponding effects. Actually, extremists is more like a parasite. Parasitizes and reproduces inside the human body. By reorganizing certain DNA within the human body, it heals the human body, enhances vitality, and increases lifespan in disguise. If not used properly, it will cause harm to the human body. Take Killian, for example. Although he gained otherworldly powers, but his lifespan will also be greatly affected. Excessive burning of substances in the body produces high-energy heat. It is easy to cause subtle damage to the interior of cells. White coats are much smarter. He was smart enough to spot the damage. This damage is then passed on to the machinery, even more ingeniously. Substances in the machinery can also be used to control the activity of extremists. Let them exert corresponding power without destroying the human body. Even Jason had to sigh. In terms of biomodification technology, this guy is indeed a genius. Centipede endoskeleton modification technology is indeed very practical. It's a pity that I can't use this technology. A trace of pity flashed in Jason's eyes. He will not reform himself, nor would he risk the disapproval of the world to modify other people's bodies. It seems that this technology can only be used at the bottom of the box. Master, why don't you combine this technology with steel armor? Skynet, who had been silent all this time, spoke. Skynet is very intelligent, but he doesn't like to talk. Most of the time, I am surfing the internet. This time Skynet suddenly spoke, which surprised Jason. However, he soon began to think about whether this technology was feasible. Soon, he felt that this was an excellent combination. Centipede endoskeleton transformation combined with steel armor. Although the extraordinary recovery ability of extremists is not used, the increase in strength and the high heat generated are very useful. No matter how bad it is, it can still be used to perish together. After thinking about it for a while, Jason felt that it was indeed feasible. But there are still some problems that need to be solved. First, there is no corresponding muscle tissue and DNA structure inside the armor. So how can the transformation technology be effective? The second is how to control this high heat to prevent it from causing damage to the original armor. After thinking for a long time, Jason spoke. Skynet, establish a new research sequence. Codenamed Biological Battle Armor Technology. Using artificial muscles to replace human muscle tissue, high-energy culture fluid provides energy for the virus. Jason's eyes flashed with excitement. The steel armor is a very great invention, but there are also disadvantages. It's too rigid and not flexible enough. It relies entirely on the power of the original suit, and the operator's original power is not outstanding. Since it is an assembled structure, it is very easy to disassemble. Once the two are combined, these shortcomings can be completely overcome. The joint structure can be transformed into a more flexible bionic structure. Moreover, the strength of the internal structure can also be guaranteed, making the armor more powerful. On the contrary, it cannot be worn by humans. It can only be operated as a robot. Definitely also very useful as a death bomb. Thinking of this, Jason became more and more excited. Skynet, contact Osborn Industries. I want to purchase several of their technologies. Secretly contact Dr. Connors to see if he has any intention of coming to work for our Wayne group. Jason immediately issued 2 orders. If you want to combine the two, there are still many technical difficulties. He was not in the mood to study, but he could just find a subordinate. In biotechnology, the Osborn Group is definitely the best in the entire Marvel industry. Dr. Connors even turned himself into a lizard man. It can be seen that he has profound knowledge in biology, as long as he could restore Dr. Connors's short limbs. Are you afraid that this guy won't kneel down and sing conquer? By the time, just leave the research and development of these things to Connors. He is only responsible for being the boss. Isn't it flattering? Chapter 48, Retrovirus Proliferation. Osborn Industries is also a very powerful group in the Bald Eagle Empire. Although he is relatively low-key in the Bald Eagle Empire, but his share of arms in the Bald Eagle military, second only to Stark Industries. Coupled with its powerful biological research technology, the comprehensive strength of Osborn Industries is rank high among all bald eagles. This achievement is inseparable from the people at the helm of Osborn Group. Norman Osborn. Before becoming Green Goblin, Norman Osborn is definitely the epitome of an entrepreneur. Do charity, engage in scientific research, nothing is left behind, and he is very gentle to his subordinates. He is close friend with Spider-Man's parents, Dr. Connors, etc. It's just a pity. In order to save his son, he still went astray. He developed drugs to treat family genetic diseases, but unfortunately, he became schizophrenic. It's really a pity. This definitely has nothing to do with Jason. He just knows. Norman Osborn must be an old fox. For example now, he's been dealing with this old fox for a long time. He didn't ask anything. Looking around and talking about other things every day is very annoying. Jason was too lazy to make excuses with the old man Norman Osborn. Mr. Osborn, everything in this world has value. I want the Osborn Group's biotechnology, and naturally, I have the right price. Oh, what do you think? Norman Osborn said with a smile. Looking at the faintly smiling Norman Osborn, I cursed in my heart, old fox. He spoke directly. Recently, our Wayne Group's scientific research department has developed something new. Our scientists have recently made some breakthroughs in biology. The research is about viruses and DNA and RNA reverse transcription. Jason stopped mid-sentence. I took a sip of coffee and looked at Norman Osborn quietly. God is fair. Although the Osborn family has super high IQ and enviable wealth. But there was also a curse. That's retroviral proliferation. This is a dominant genetic disease. Usually early in life, there are no symptoms at all. But as I get older, this disease will show up. After Norman Osborn fell ill, his hands would soon start to shake and his life would not be guaranteed. No one in the Osborn family can enjoy their old age in peace. Why Norman Osborn is so crazy. He used the unsuccessfully researched medicine on himself. It was because his son, who was only a teenager, had symptoms that appeared at his age. In order to save his son, he could only do this. But in the end, Although the potion took effect, he himself became schizophrenic. This genetic disease is a curse that binds the Osborn family. Moreover, the pathogenic mechanism of the disease is the gene coding region, which has a CAG tandem repeat sequence. People with the disease have far more repetitions than normal people. When passed from the parent generation to the native generation, the number of CAG repetitions continues to increase. As a result, the age of onset of disease in offspring gradually advances. That is to say, Osborn family, the lifespan of the next generation will become shorter and shorter, until the entire family is completely destroyed. It would be strange if Norman Osborn wasn't crazy. The information he provided is about this knowledge. It is very likely that it will be useful for the genetic disease in the Osborn family. He didn't believe that Norman Osborn could refuse this bargaining chip. As expected, after he spoke, Norman Osborn's hand shook uncontrollably. Then Norman Osborn quietly covered it up. However, this still couldn't escape Jason's eyes. I was extremely anxious. Norman Osborn's face remained calm at all. How can I be sure that this information is true? Mr. Osborn can inspect the goods first. A bright smile appeared on Jason's face. Then he took out a USB flash drive directly. Norman Osborn hesitated for a moment and took the USB flash drive. Just plug it into your laptop and start watching. Norman Osborn is not just an entrepreneur. He is also a scientist. Whether it is medicine to treat genetic diseases or Green Goblin's own equipment, they are all developed by him. There is nothing wrong with reading a piece of information. Soon, as he read the technical information, the expression on Norman Osborn's face changed. Feeling a little emotional, the veins on his forearms were exposed. In his heart, Norman Osborn even roared directly. That's right. That's it. Reverse transcription gene shuffling. With just a little more, I can create a real potion. Norman Osborn moved the mouse quickly, trying to look down. But the information stopped abruptly. The content behind it is completely blank. Norman Osborn looked up directly at Jason. The eyes were actually bloodshot. What about the rest of the content? Osborn asked in a deep voice. Then we have to have a good talk. Jason sat firmly on the leather seat and said while holding a cup of coffee. The way Norman Osborn looked at Jason, a hint of coldness flashed in his eyes. However, he soon calmed down. If the person sitting in front of him was an ordinary person, he would decide to kill and steal without saying a word. But sitting in front of him was the eldest son of the Wayne Group. He was not sure about taking action at all. I can't afford that price either. Even if his family's secrets might be leaked, he could only endure it for now. The higher the status, the more powerful the Wayne family could be felt. After thinking about it, Norman Osborn sat up straight. What do you want? Norman Osborn, who knew he had leaked the bottom line, asked directly without saying more. For him, as long as he can cure the disease in his family, everything else is external. Even if it costs Osborn Group, it's not a big deal. Mr. Osborn, I said what I wanted from the beginning. I want all biological science research from the Osborn Group. Also, I hope to invite Dr. Connors to work for our Wayne Group. Norman Osborn looked up at Jason. No problem, technology can give it to you. However, I can't agree to it for Connors. You need to make your own connections. If he agrees, I have nothing to say. Hearing Norman Osborn's words, Jason put a smile on his face. Well, Mr. Osborn, a pleasure to work with. Jason reached out and shook Norman Osborn's hand. A pleasure to work with. Although Norman Osborn looked a little ugly, but I still shook hands with Jason, although some disadvantages. But it was worth it to get what he wanted. After thinking about it in his mind, Norman Osborn sighed. Chapter 49. Character Inspection. There is no doubt that Norman Osborn is a very shrewd man. He was at the beginning. He even just wanted to exchange the research results of the Osborn Group laboratory for his technology. Fortunately, Jason discovered it in time. Otherwise, he will suffer a big loss. Osborn's original biotechnology is not as good as their Wayne Group's biotechnology, except for that accidental spider that created Spider-Man. The only thing left to see is Dr. Connors' lizard potion. It's just that this isn't what Jason really wants. What he wants, it was actually the Green Goblin potion created by Norman Osborn. The human body strengthening potions in the Marvel world seem to be carved from the same mold, although it can strengthen various comprehensive properties of the human body. But it will amplify the emotions in the human body. The same goes for Captain America, and the same goes for Green Goblin. Green Goblin potion is a very powerful potion. Not only can it greatly improve the strength and overall quality of the human body, it can also strengthen the brain and improve human IQ. Norman Osborn was injected with this potion. He was indeed cured of a family genetic disease and became smarter. But the negative emotions in the body are also amplified. Eventually, the Green Goblin personality was formed and swallowed up the main personality. But apart from that, the Green Goblin potion is almost the same as the Super Soldier Serum without any drawbacks. This is exactly what Jason wants. Anyway, he didn't intend to use this thing on himself. The armor has no personality at all. Naturally, there is no mention of side effects. For him, Green Goblin potion is the perfect potion as long as it can be combined with extremis. The strength of his biological armor can definitely be greatly improved. Thinking of this, Jason even laughed out loud. "Mr. Jason, what are you laughing at?" Norman Osborn said, while suppressing his anger. He had already suffered a loss in the transaction. He handed over the half-completed Green Goblin potion. Now that Jason was still smiling so happily in front of him, he was naturally very annoyed. "Nothing, Mr. Osborn. I remembered something happy." A bewildered smile appeared on Jason's face. This made Norman Osborn even more annoyed. He said in a very stiff tone, "Since there is nothing else, I won't keep Mr. Jason here as a guest. As for Dr. Connors, you can contact him yourself." Jason looked at the old man Norman Osborn with an ugly expression. It's like someone in the family dies. He had no intention of continuing the conversation with this sinister old man. "Then I'll take my leave, Mr. Osborn. A pleasure to work with," Jason said again. Norman Osborn looked like he wanted to beat him to death. Don't even bother to say a kind word. Jason wasn't impressed either. This old fox was blackmailed by him. "I'm probably not in a good mood. He won't be annoying anymore." Said 2 sentences. Jason left directly from the Osborn building. Except for the Osborn building, Jason spoke to Skynet. "Skynet, have you contacted Dr. Connors?" "How did he say?" "Dr. Connors has agreed to your request for a meeting and agreed to meet at a coffee shop on 5th Avenue. Skynet reports meticulously. Jason nodded when he heard this. This was not unexpected at all. It was perfectly normal for Connors to say yes. Since breaking an arm, Connors seemed to be in a daze. Has been researching limb regeneration technology. Although to a certain extent, I want to benefit the disabled. But most of the reasons are for myself. And his research in this area has been very in-depth. If it weren't for Norman Osborn's sudden change of temperament at the end, defund his laboratory, he might actually be able to develop the perfect limb regeneration potion. But without the support of Osborn Group, Connors is also a clever woman. Scientific research is inherently a money-burning activity. There is not enough financial support. Plus, originally eager for quick results. It is not surprising that Connors developed a half-finished potion and transformed into a city lizard. It can only be considered that he was unlucky. Shaked his head. Jason got into his Rolls-Royce and walked towards the agreed-upon cafe. A few minutes of work. Jason arrived at the cafe they had agreed upon. To avoid trouble, he directly booked this cafe. Therefore, Dr. Connors was the only one in the empty cafe. Connors looked suave. There's a pair of gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose, and his hair is well taken care of. Looks like an intellectual. Only, the empty white sleeve hanging next to it. It gave him an aura of decadence. Jason glanced at him and walked up directly. "Hello, Dr. Connors. Are you Mr. Jason?" Connors glanced at Jason in disbelief. Although Jason is growing up very fast now, he is almost as tall as an adult. But the childish look on his face still betrayed his age. "Yes, I'm Jason Wayne." Jason shook hands generously and sat across from Connors. Connors glanced at Jason again, said a little embarrassed, "I didn't expect Mr. Jason to be so young." "You are really young and promising." As if realizing something, Dr. Connors added again. Hearing this, Jason smiled. Compared to an old fox like Norman Osborn, Dr. Connors is undoubtedly much easier to deal with. Whatever is on your mind is shown on your face, and you can see at a glance. Very naive. After drinking a cup of coffee brought by his subordinates, Jason smiled and said, Dr. Connors, since you are here, you should have some ideas about our Wayne Group's proposal. Hearing this, Connors smiled bitterly. Mr. Jason misunderstood. The terms offered by Wayne Group are indeed very generous. But I'm afraid I can't go. Oh, why is that? When Jason heard this, instead of being angry, a trace of appreciation flashed across his face. He didn't let Skynet tell Connors his final trump card. Instead, they only offered generous benefits. As long as Connors arrives at Wayne Group, he will have access to a large biological laboratory. Take full charge of. Sufficient annual funding. He said he did this just to test Connors' character. Although in various film and television works, Dr. Connors, who is not transformed, is a very gentle and kind person. Apart from being a bit obsessed with research, there are no other shortcomings at all. But Jason was still a little worried. Film and television works are film and television works after all. He wants to hand over such a big base to Connors. A lot of confidential information will also be revealed. Connors without looking into it. How could he be relieved? Chapter 50. Skills that superiors must master. Connors has always considered himself a grateful person. Although at the beginning, the treatment given by Wayne Group really made him very excited. But when I thought about being favored by Norman Osborn, he felt guilty for himself, so he decided to continue working at Osborn Group. It's just that Wayne Group gave such excellent treatment. Of course, he wanted to thank you. Mr. Jason, thank you very much for the Wayne Group's appreciation. But Mr. Osborn is very much indebted to me. I'm sorry I can't work at Wayne Group. After saying that, Ness became calmer, looking directly at Jason. The hesitation and uncertainty disappeared from his face. Hearing him say this, Jason's face was full of appreciation. It's really hard to find someone as honest and easy to deceive as Connors. He didn't even think about it. Without the permission of Norman Osborn, that 5 or 60-old fox, how could the Osborn Group cut off the supply of resources to his laboratory? Even if it is like this, Connors was still full of gratitude and didn't complain at all. I have to say, Connors is a good comrade. Dr. Connors, it doesn't have to be this way. I know that Mr. Osborn is very kind to you, but you don't have to worry. I've talked to Mr. Osborn. You can feel free to come and work at Wayne Group. Jason smiled and said, Are you telling the truth? Connors said with some doubt. Definitely true. Not only that, can I also give you something that the Osborn Group cannot give you? Jason smiled and said. Hearing this, Connors' face was full of suspicion. The conditions that Wayne Group can provide are already excellent in his opinion. He couldn't figure it out. What other conditions can Wayne Group offer? Jason looked at Connors, who was full of doubts, and said calmly, Dr. Connors is currently studying genetic modification, right? By combining genes from other organisms to change the replication and division of human cells and achieve the purpose of reborn broken limbs. That's right. Connors admitted without hesitation. His research direction can be known with just a little investigation. There is nothing to keep secret. What really needs to be kept secret is how this process is carried out. Genetic modification is not that easy. The human genetic chain is very complex. A slight mistake may cause genetic collapse. He is not afraid that his experimental results will be leaked. Hearing this, a confident smile appeared on Jason's face. That's just right. Our Wayne Group also has such research, and it's getting to the point where it can be exploited. Jason said with a smile. This is impossible. Connors said decisively. There is no first place in literature and no second place in military service. Every scientist is proud. Although Dr. Connors seems gentle, he is also very proud of his professional field. How can it be? Jason asked rhetorically. Before Connors could speak, Jason spoke again. Let's not talk about our Wayne Group. Let's talk about Dr. Zhao Hailuan from. There is also research in this area, and preliminary results have been achieved. Dr. Zhao Hailuan is the woman who was given the Ultron-made body by Women's Federation No. 2 Middle School. She also has in-depth research on the rebirth of the human body. Reborn a broken limb is also very easy. However, this will take a few years. But so far, the results she has achieved are enough to convince Connors. At present, Comrade Connors' experiments only exist in theory. None of the experiments on mice were successful. I heard Jason say this. Connors fell silent for a moment. He is not a fool either. He had seen relevant research by Dr. Zhao Hailuan. It can be seen that she is heading in the right direction. As long as we can continue to research, we can really develop the technology to achieve broken limb reborn. After thinking for a while, Connors sighed and said, "In that case, why does Mr. Jason pay a lot of money to invite me? If your company's technology can already be applied to the human body, my skills are completely useless." Connor's tone was full of frustration. It doesn't feel good to be defeated by someone in the field you are best at. Jason looked at the frustrated Connors and smiled again. "Dr. Connors, what you said is wrong. Although our company's technology is very mature, it is not perfect. There's still a lot of room for improvement. And I think Dr. Connors' research field is very promising. If Dr. Connors can join us at Wayne Group, we don't just let you have the lab to yourself, and we can share our research results." Connors was shocked when he heard this. "Mr. Jason, are you telling the truth? You're not kidding." "Definitely," Jason said without hesitation. "Why?" "Mr. Jason, your conditions are too advantageous," Connors said hesitantly. "Dr. Connors, don't belittle yourself. Your research results are much more valuable than imagined," Jason said in a faint tone. "Genetic modification is a very promising direction. What hinders the development of this discipline is not actually technological factors, but the ethical factor. This has prevented human body modification from developing. But Jason never wanted to develop body modification. The human body is so fragile. Physical combat effectiveness ranks last in nature. Why does he want to modify the human body? Doesn't he transform animals? That guy Thanos can use biomorphs. Why can't he? Moreover, that's not all Connors is good for. It can also help him transform his armor. All he paid was an inconspicuous technology and a little money. That would get Connors away. He made a lot of money." Hearing what Jason said, Connors was also very moved. "Mr. Jason, 3.9, you don't have to do this, Dr. Connors. We at Wayne Group attach great importance to talents. If Dr. Connors is worried about Mr. Osborn, he has no need to worry. We at Wayne Group have paid enough. As long as Dr. Connors is willing, he can leave directly," Jason said, pretending to be noble. Shamelessly, he described his transaction with the Osborn Group as paying a huge price for Connors. A compulsory lesson for those in power is to tell lies with their eyes open. The thicker the skin, the better. Sure enough, Dr. Connors, who was an intellectual, had no doubts at all and was completely moved. "I was almost moved to tears." Jason was overjoyed when he saw the moved expression on Connors' face. "It's done. Connors was already in his possession. I couldn't run away even if I wanted to." Chapter 51, Human Experiments. Jason's favorite people are those who work in technology, no matter where in the world it is. Most academic people are very naive. Dr. Connors is one of the best. Jason was just a little fooled. Dr. Connors immediately made up his mind to change jobs from Osborn Industries to work for Wayne Group. After talking about it, Dr. Connors is also very efficient. Norman Osborn, the old fox. He had long since refused to invest himself in Dr. Connors' research that was of no use to him. It's just that the scene was saved. Just let Dr. Connors go. 2 days of work. Dr. Connors took care of the family affairs and came directly to Gotham. Jason received him warmly and then took him to see the laboratory. "Dr. Connors, this is your laboratory." Jason pointed to the entire building in front of him and said to Dr. Connors, "Mr. Jason, which floor is my laboratory on?" Dr. Connors obviously does not have a clear understanding of the Wayne family's wealth. He also cautiously asked Jason which floor his laboratory was on. "There is no floor. This building is all." Jason shook his head. After Jason traveled through time, inheriting the fine tradition of Bruce Wayne, good at solving problems at their root cause. How can you buy one floor when buying a laboratory? You must buy it directly. Dr. Connors was stunned when he heard this. "Are they all in this building?" "Yes, this building is a biological laboratory. You will be the supervisor here from now on." Jason stood up on tiptoes and patted Connors on the shoulder. After getting the confirmed news from Jason, Connors felt as if he was in a dream. When he was in the Osborn group, where had he ever enjoyed such treatment? Although he has a laboratory in the Osborn group, it is nothing in the Osborn group. This laboratory is not the largest either. Now comes Wayne Group. Jason gave him such a big building. This kind of trust moved him very much. Mr. Jason. Okay, stop talking about Dr. Connors. Let's go in and take a look. We also want to introduce relevant information to you. Jason said something and took Connors in directly. The building has 8 floors. The biosafety level has reached P4 level. It is a laboratory with the highest biosafety level in the world. There are only 56 such laboratories recorded in the world. Most of the time, such laboratories are used to study highly contagious viruses. Have a laboratory like this? Probably the dream of every biologist in the world. At the moment, there are already many experimenters in the laboratory. They are all researchers seconded by the Wayne Group to do basic work. Take a look around the laboratory. Connors was increasingly surprised. Whether it was equipment, personnel, or various security measures, everything exceeded his expectations. Okay, Dr. Connors, we've finished looking at the lab. It's time for us to look at the things you care about. Jason smiled, which made Connors blush a little. During the visit just now, Connors had been looking at Extremis experimental site. It seems that the obsession with broken limb rebirth is very deep. When Connors saw Jason, he found out and no longer tried to hide it. Said directly, Mr. Jason, has Wayne Group's drug begun human testing? Yes, it has entered the human trial stage. Jason nodded, although Extremis technology is after system upgrade. But he was still worried. Necessary experiments are still very necessary. Hearing this, Connors' eyes flashed with excitement.
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.